Howdy, tubers and footers. Look, I have a special guest tonight. Uncle
Hello.
Bones has joined us.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Woohoo!
Nice to see you, Uncle Bones.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Good to have you on. Good
Yeah,
times.
took us a while to get here. I almost decayed. All right.
We thought this would be fun, you guys. It's really dun 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 da.
Yeah, it's really crazy, man.
It's my buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going? How you doing today?
I am good. I am good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
It's almost 4th of July down here.
all right.
Half hour Independence Day. I'm gonna light up some. Can I light up some fireworks in here?
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, it's only 7:30 here, so we got a while to go up here in
It would
Alaska.
probably be very bright and loud if I lit one off in here, so I won't. But I'm sure someone in my neighborhood is going to be lighting some fireworks.
There you go. Yeah, I don't think I have to worry about that out here.
Yeah.
It's so dry up here. I don't think they're even going to have the stands open. I should drive by there and go check.
If it's that dry, forest fire alerts.
Yeah. I mean, it's so dry, a little shrew could fart and set the whole freaking forest off.
Oh man, woo! I have some stories about shrews.
Do you?
Taking over my garage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Amy, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Good to see you. I hope you're doing okay. She's had a few surgeries here recently, and she's in recovery mode.
Oh, okay.
I believe are you in? I think she's in Louisiana or Florida. She was going between the two, but
okay.
Yeah, she might be in your neck of the woods.
Or my
hey,
neck
Texas
of the
Jack, welcome. So Texas Jack is building this awesome vehicle to make the road trip up to Alaska from Texas.
Oh, like a truck, camper, bus.
It's a bus.
Bus? Okay.
Yeah, decked out with solar panels, the whole 9 yards.
Oh wow. Yeah, that'd be a fun little excursion.
Yeah.
Love the road trip going up there. I've gone both Alcan routes, from Seattle up through Vancouver, up the old Alcan, and then I've gone the part through that comes up through Edmonton.
Okay. Yeah.
Over at an angle to Dawson Creek, and then meets up with the old one.
Yeah, I think I've made every single route in and out of Canada, like through the different parts, because we drove from, originally from, California up to Alaska's was my dad's first trip up,
Mm-hmm.
and we've done that route down to California. We've done the route down to Texas, and then we've done the route over to New York. So we've taken all the different, little highways into the States.
Canada is a beautiful country.
Yeah.
Especially Yukon Territory, British Columbia, Alberta. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
The whole Rockies area.
It's gorgeous.
Love it.
One of my favorite places in Canada is called Pink Mountain.
Oh.
Yeah, it's covered in fireweed.
Ooh,
so like right now and through, the mid-July and into August, it's all just hot pink.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, Amy, I hope you feel better soon. She's had a rough few days.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Hopefully you feel better soon.
So Derek lived up here in Alaska. He's down there in Oregon. He's down there in Florida now.
Yep. Orlando.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Yeah, he's in the Orlando area. And so, as you can see, he's got many multi-talented musician, artist.
Or just multi-crazy. Yep.
That's why we're friends. That's why we get along so well.
Yep.
Our crazy balances.
Yep. Yep.
So, when you were up here in Alaska, you've had quite a few experiences up here
Yeah,
of
I lived up there
like
for 29 years on and off. So,
nice.
yeah, quite a few.
Eh, So you've had like some weird encounters in the like something suspicious in the woods, and you've had photographed some lights near Flat Top.
Yeah, those are yeah, two experiences I had. One was kind of like on the lines of Bigfoot type story.
Uh
Um, oh yeah, I'm not gonna starve. Lots of maggots and lots of brains. You ever see Forrest Gump? Bubba Gump talked about how he cooked shrimp so many different ways. Well, I could do the same thing with maggots. Um,
huh.
I'm just playing. But yeah, I've seen a lot of lights and unexplained things up in Alaska. Seen some things that are explained, like like I mentioned, about the seeing the Mir space station crash and burn
Oh
in the
yeah,
atmosphere.
tell people about that. They're gonna love that.
So we were on my family and I were on a scuba dive trip down to Cozumel, which is a little island off the coast of Cancun, Mexico, and really, really awesome scuba diving. For anybody who likes scuba diving, there's the Palancar Gardens and all kinds of other really cool
Oh,
coral reef that Jacques Cousteau made famous back in the days when he had his TV show,
okay, yeah.
Ballpark. But he's the one who discovered all that, and it's drift diving, so the current just cruises you on along. So if you see something cool, enjoy it real quick because you're going to fly on by it, kind of thing.
Oh,
uh, and you can't, no matter how hard you try, you can't swim against the current.
okay.
But anyway, so while we were at Cozumel, we were staying at it was Beaches Resort, um, owned by the company that owns Sandals. Beaches, family oriented Sandals.
Okay, yeah. I remember the commercials.
So we were at Beaches, and it was my older brother, my younger brother, um, and our oldest nephew, um, my oldest brother's son. And we were out at the beach. My older brother and I were out there at a pier talking to a local fisherman who didn't have a fishing pole. He just had the line. He was hanging it down
Okay, yeah.
over the pier,
Uh-huh.
and it was it was like a full moon because you could actually see silhouettes of the marine life in there. And there was
Uh-huh.
a hammerhead shark that was coming in here, and this local crazy guy, he was like, okay, so he had the whole line wound up, carrying in his hand. He didn't have no mechanical stuff, no fishing pole, no reel or whatever. He just had the line and then a hook. He was just dropping, so he was holding the line almost like it was rope. It's just a big line.
Yep.
So he handed it to me and my brother, and he said, "Okay, run this to the beach." And then he's going to hook the hammerhead, and then we're going to pull it to the shore. So anyway, long story short, we were running down the pier, and we got stopped mid tracks and spun around because he did hook the hammerhead, but the hammerhead super strong. And when we were running to the shore, I was almost gonna wrap it around my arm like this, so that way when I got to the beach, I'd have some leverage. Ooh, I'm glad I didn't do that because that would have yanked my arm.
Ow.
But anyway, so my younger brother and nephew were building a bonfire on the beach, and so my older brother and I were made it to the shore, and because that the whole hammerhead thing didn't work out, and seen this fireball flying across the sky. And it wasn't, a falling star or anything like that, or shooting star. It was the Mir Russian space station, and it was coming into, the atmosphere, burning up and crashing in the ocean. So that thing, it was just fire the whole way. Because obviously there's a lot of material there, and unlike a shooting star, they usually just last a blink of an eye kind of thing, or maybe a couple seconds, few seconds, because they burn up pretty quick. Mir space station was like just long
Wow.
fireball. So that's pretty cool. So that was
Ah,
a light that we seen that was explainable,
okay.
because that was in 2002, 2001 ballpark kind of thing. But yeah, a lot of unexplainable things, in particular up in Alaska, because you know how crazy clear the sky is up there.
Yep.
Especially if you're outside of the city. I mean, you could see the band of the Milky Way going at an angle across the sky, and you could see like
Mhm.
shit tons of stars and stuff like that. And sometimes you could see things zipping on by, lights. They're like satellites or whatever. Um, but then a lot of times you'll see some things that are unexplainable. And I don't know. I would probably venture to say it was either like um, military aircraft that we're not
Ooh.
aware of, or something along those lines. Because it was, because I've been to air shows. My dad was
Mhm.
for 22 years. We grew up around planes and some of the fastest stuff like that. But yep, in Florida, Orlando. Um, but yeah, some of the lights that I'd see up in Alaska would do some weird stuff. It'll almost be, I mean, very small, almost like a satellite kind of thing, but then they would change direction and do some other weird stuff. And that's why I'm saying it almost seemed like it was like stealth planes or something like that, where you could actually see them in the nighttime sky, but they didn't have lights on. You just see, this.
Was
So
it in
this
our atmosphere or further out?
they were so tiny,
Mhm.
almost like when you see a satellite. How
Mhm.
tiny the
Yep.
lighting is from a satellite, kind of like that. And I
Okay.
think the only thing lighting it up was the moon, reflection of
Oh.
the moon, because it didn't have like airplane lights, like a commercial airline or anything like that. Then of course, I told you about the story at Flat Top, where
Mm.
Chicks and I were hiking, and I got some pictures of while we were hiking up Blueberry Hill, going around the saddle, working our way up towards Flat Top. I was taking pictures of Anchorage, down in the bowl and all that stuff, and spinning around. And as I spun around, Jason was like, I don't know, judging by the picture, 100 yards, 50 yards up the trail from me, quite a ways. I mean, he looked like little tiny in the picture, but he had his hand pointing up towards Flat Top, and there was this, these lights that were flying up. They were kind of blurred out from the picture, but then I mean, all kinds of different stories. You know,
Wow.
yeah, Bigfoot kind of things.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's hear that one. That one was that up in North Pole? When you were in North Pole, or was that when you were in Anchorage?
yeah, most of the Bigfoot ones were in the interior,
Okay.
although there were some, like McHugh Creek,
Ooh, yeah. Love that place.
McHugh Mountain going around towards Seward.
Mhm.
So the creek, and then if you cross over the bridge going across the creek and you work your way up the trail until it ends, and then there's that sheer bluff where they could, hand and fist up it. You don't need like mountain climbing gear or whatever, but you could just climb up it. So Jason and I were up there, and we thought it was another one of those Bigfoot kind of sound kind of encounters, but we did eventually deduce it down to it was a bear,
Oh.
a giant steaming pile.
Oh,
Yeah, fresh pile.
clear
Um,
evidence.
yeah, yeah. So around the Anchorage area, it wasn't so much the Bigfoot encounters, but
Okay.
up in the interior, though, that was a different story because you know. Like North Pole is a very small town, but you could easily go out into the boondocks just by going in any direction for like 5, 10 minutes kind of thing.
Right.
And the interesting thing is up there, there's a lot of places where there's Fort Wainwright near Fairbanks, and then
Mhm.
about 21 miles away is Alaskan Air Force Base, and both of them have huge training areas in the hills, um, you know, back there,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of weird things that obviously happen in situations around there, but the
Don't they have what do they have up there now? They have the F-35s up there now, up at,
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't been up there for a number of years, but yeah, I'd imagine that they'd have at Eielson, since that was see, the Air Force has two different commands. There's what's called SAC, which is Strategic Air Command, and
okay.
TAC, which is Tactical Air Command. So Elmendorf in Anchorage is TAC, which means it has the fighter jets, and then Eielson up in near Fairbanks, North Pole, is SAC. So that means it has things like support, like C-130 cargo planes,
Okay.
AWACS. It has
Oh, I
some.
see them transport back and forth all the time.
Oh yeah, yep. So the now then there's also the difference between Richardson and Wainwright. So at Wainwright, up at Fairbanks, they have a lot of the Chinook, the dual propeller helicopters.
Uh-huh.
So they have shit tons of those all up there, and then
Oh,
Fort
yeah,
Richardson.
Eielson does have the F-35s.
Oh, it does.
Yep,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
April, the last of the final 2, arrived.
Yeah, Eielson, as far as like so,
They got
Elmendorf would
quite
have
a few of them.
Elmendorf would have the F-22s, which are the air superiority, and
Mhm.
then Eielson would have because it used to have the F-16s, whereas
Right.
Elmendorf had the F-15s. So the F-15s were the air superiority, and the F-16s were more support. And so that makes sense that Eielson would get the F-35s, which is the successor of the F-16, and then Elmendorf would get the F-22, which is the successor of F-15s. But Eielson was
Yeah.
a cool base because if you go to where the ski lodge is, the road that goes up to it just keeps going and going. I mean, we went down that road one time for like 2 hours, and it just keeps weaving and weaving back there. And like way back there, there's like old World War II outpost, and there's just all kinds of shit littered all about. I mean, you can find shell casings and all kinds of other
Oh,
really
man,
cool
what a
things.
great place to explore.
Very old. Now my older brother Sean, he stepped on a rusted nail when we were out there, and so we had to rush him to the hospital. But yeah, there's so way back in those hills, that's where they do a lot of their wintertime training. So you were talking about ghillie suits earlier.
Yep,
So at Eielson, they'd have the Arctic ones that are all white.
the white and the grays and the yeah.
Yep, because they'd be training, you know, uh, mainly to compete with Russia.
Yeah,
So
I've come across them out snow machining while they were out training. It's kind of freaked me out a couple times, like, they're out there and it's
it
like,
is pretty weird seeing just seeing someone out in the middle of nowhere just wearing one. It's like, oh hey, how
yeah,
you doing?
what is happening? Just kinda like,
I was
okay."
going to ask what are you up to, but now I know. Being stealthy.
Hey, Polly D, welcome. So Amy was saying, up here, she was saying that she's in Florida by Destin,
Okay.
um, I guess near the Gulf Breeze, where they have those UFO sightings. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, now I haven't seen any myself, but some of the
Okay.
stories I've heard are the UFOs in and around Florida and in the Caribbean they go in and out of the water.
Oh,
So there's stories of lights that would just come out, and then stories of them going in.
yeah.
And now I haven't seen, like I said, any of those myself because I'm inland and I don't get to the beach much. But of the other things that I've gathered, like reading online or watching videos or whatever, hearing other stories, is that some people report that they don't leave awake when they go in or out of the water. No
Yes,
splash,
no
no water motion
splash.
freezing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that they go in so quick and emerge so fast, you'd think there'd be some kind of effect or motion from the water, some response, but there isn't.
Which is really crazy because we talked before about how water has memory.
Mhm.
How can't remember where the scientists were. I think it was somewhere in Europe where they did this test where they put objects inside of like a tank of water, and then they'd pull them out, and their imagery would still show the outline of the object in the water even after they pulled it out of the water, kind of thing. It was almost like the water molecules were kind of maintaining it, even though it's not like, I mean, obviously you could do something like that with Jello. You
Mhm.
put something in the Jello and pull it out, the shape of it would still be kind of scarred in the Jello, but in water, you know,
There's so much we're still learning about water and just, the forces that we have on our planet that we don't know much about, and yeah, and they've even found another, form, right?
oh yeah, water. I think they're up to 20 something
Yeah.
different states that water can occupy.
Mhm.
Obviously, we know of steam and ice and
Mhm.
mist, and and so many different forms that we see in the day to day. But then there's water, like if it's put under extreme pressure or extreme heat, turns into like a superfluid and other weird exotics. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of ice that they discovered, and
Yeah,
just wild stuff.
learning a lot, and I don't know if you've looked at any of that. I think it was Dr. Emoto that did a lot of experiments with water and talking to water and, like, using just putting pieces of paper underneath a bottle of water, like, that would say love or hate or, and they do all these different experiments where he would speak to the water and you could see the difference, in how it would respond and just, like, at a molecular level, and
Mhm.
that was fascinating, and there are so many people that are doing these other types of experiments where they put, like, rice or some kind of thing in water
Mhm.
and they speak to it either with love or kindness, generosity or hate or, and the difference in what the water how the water even responds,
Mm.
so fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Um, there's this one experiment I've seen where scientists they sent a sound wave down a laser beam,
Okay.
and it was received at the other end. And
Oh.
basically, what they were trying to do was not that wasn't my understanding wasn't the objective of the experiment. What they were trying to do was make something go faster than the speed of light. So they were saying, well, if we took the speed of light and we add the speed of sound on top of that, are we going faster? But obviously it didn't. The speed of light still was the speed of light, but the sound that they transmitted through it was received at the other end. And so, just weird stuff like that when you're talking about molecular levels, quantum levels, and stuff like that. And then you talk about water. Um, one of the fascinating things that I've seen recently with water was I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Mhm.
He was
Good
talking
night,
about
Amy.
the size of molecules. Oh, good night, Amy.
Yep.
He was talking about the size of molecules, and his co-host was on the show, and he says to give you an idea of how small a molecule is, he said if you have a glass of water, there's more molecules of water in that glass than there are glasses of water in all of the oceans. So when you think about how many glasses of water in the oceans,
Mhm.
there's more molecules within one glass of water than there are glasses of water, and that's just mind-boggling to think. You know, I mean, how many glasses of water are in a swimming pool?
Right.
Lots. But then you think about the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, all that stuff. I mean, we're talking a number that's who knows how big, but and then you think that's how many molecules are in one glass of water. And so
Fascinating.
there's a lot of things with water that are pretty amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
to think that all life as we know it, you know, originates from water, and yeah,
That is so intriguing. Water is one of those forces that, can be gentle and soothing, and yet at the same time, it can burrow a hole through stone.
yeah, that's one of the cool things about water is it's yeah, I like that how Bruce Lee always talked about be like water, be formless, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
because water can exist in so many different states. You know, soft and strong at the same time. Yeah,
Be like water, my friend.
yep. Yeah, there's oh, since we're talking about science and stuff like that, I
Mhm.
believe on July 11th is when you heard about the James Webb telescope.
Yes.
So that's the newest telescope that's up there. It's 10 times more powerful than the Hubble. So they're gonna release the first set of images on July 11th.
Oh, right
11th
in time for
of
my birthday.
So they say they focused it at the furthest known location that we've ever seen before. I guess the furthest galaxy,
Yeah.
and they're taking an image of that to compare it with the image from the Hubble.
Oh.
So it'll be pretty interesting.
I'll be looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, because the Hubble was just a blur. It's just
Mhm.
it looked like 2 pixels.
Mhm.
It's so far away, so low res. But the web should be should be able to make out a lot more since it's higher resolution.
Yeah.
It'll be
Water
pretty
is the
interesting.
only liquid on this planet that is incomprehensible.
Maybe I don't know.
Water is just fascinating. Like I said, Dr. Emoto was doing these different, on a molecular level. And when
Mhm,
he's taking these photographs of all the molecules in the water and how they were responding, and some
mhm,
of the crystals were just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And
mhm,
then, when you look at the fear and the hate and the dark, the darker type, it's
mhm,
just distorted and they weren't, symmetrical and, you know,
mhm.
interesting.
That is interesting stuff. Shapes of things. Have you ever seen that video, like where someone had a speaker and they put a little board on top of it, and they put metal shavings on there, and then they would send a certain tone through it, and then the metal shavings would take a certain geometrical shape, and then they'd send a different tone, going from like low to high or whatever, different tones in it, and each tone, the metal shavings would reorient into a different geometrical shape, and it was pretty interesting um, how that came to be. But then you think about things like water, or like you were talking about crystals, and all the different states that it could be. The shapes of the water molecules change depending on the state and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Pretty crazy stuff.
it is crazy stuff. And it's so interesting, And like Patrick Vaughn, he's pretty interesting guy. He's does some incredible tracking, but he also has a pretty impressive background himself. Like he
Cool.
said here, he studied hydrodynamic to re-engineer jet propulsion systems and marine applications as a
Cool.
personal project. Just for
It
fun.
sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. I'd be interested to see what he comes up with. Is
Yeah,
a lot of fun
right,
things you'd be able to do with that kind of stuff.
right. Be worth his weight in gold out in Bristol Bay.
Oh yeah, jet propulsion fire hose.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
just keeping the fishermen out on the water and moving, that's,
Oh yeah.
getting yeah. Speaking of, the guys are over 100,000 pounds.
Sweet, sweet, sweet.
Yeah,
Oh, Jake and Joe. Yep.
yeah. They're
As
still pretty
uh,
close.
yeah, how's Joe faring? Is he a little
Well,
better?
Joe isn't sleeping well, and he's having, night terrors.
Mhm.
So, this is something that just recently started, so I think I'm gonna try and send out a package to him with some.
Has he been on water this long before?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, he's been doing this since he was 11 years old.
Hmm. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. So this is the first time he's ever experienced this?
Yeah, to this degree.
He might just need to get his feet back on land for, you know, to get his
Just a little
bearings,
bit.
straight, whatever.
Yeah.
It, I mean, being out there on the surf, I mean, especially in
Yeah.
Alaska.
Yeah, well, it's not. Yeah. They're so far out, just to get to the shore is quite a journey for him, and the fish are hopping right now, so
Ooh, sockeye.
yeah. Yeah.
And you said so both boats have over 100,000.
Yeah. Jake yeah, the Ruthless is, up over, let's see, Captain Jake's well over 130,000 pounds by now, and, the Serac, that's the one that Skipper Joe is on, and that one is they're pushing over 100 right now, so,
So about almost a quarter mil.
yeah, you're getting there,
Man,
pushing and
I
pushing.
could use a couple pounds down here. I'll send you up something. What do you want?
Yeah. Well,
Some
like, yeah, they'll probably like, the Serac will probably get close to 160,000 pounds,
by the end of it.
might push up to maybe up to 200,000. The Ruthless will probably get near 300,000 pounds by the time it's all said and done. I mean, that's the kind of numbers they normally pull out of there. So,
Mm,
and it's
it's
again
crazy.
record returns this year. So,
I'll bring some um, cream cheese. Yeah, one of my favorite ways of having salmon is smoked salmon and
yes,
cream cheese.
yes.
I could just you could give me a bowl of that, and I'd turn into a bowl of a human. I just sit there and eat the whole thing.
Yeah. Grind
It's so
down.
good.
Yes,
It's so good.
it's so good. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating when you see how much the salmon is in the store, and how
It's
much they're
crazy.
pulling out of the water. It's kind of like, oh,
Yep. It's crazy. I mean, some of the prices of things don't make sense. Like milk down here, a gallon of milk costs more than a gallon of gas. And I'm
whew,
like, I could walk up to a cow, grab an udder, and get some milk. Now, I've never milked a cow, but I've seen TV shows of people do it. I'd be like, but
not as easy as it looks.
gas, it's like, okay, so I'd have to have a oil rig, be able to pull it out of the ground, have a refinery, be able to extract the gas out of it. It's like, how the heck is cow's milk more than gas? I don't get
That's
it.
crazy. I did because there's always people that make these videos up here that, oh, look at how expensive it is to go shopping in Alaska. Oh, it's so, and it is. Don't get me wrong. In the villages and outside of the city, it can get insane.
Especially
When there's,
alcohol.
oh, yeah. But when they're spending, 10 over $10 a gallon of,
Mm-hmm.
for milk, easy, you know, and that was pre all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and loaves of bread, just outrageous, but in town anymore, it seems like it's not that much different from the lower 48. Like, it doesn't seem
It's
like it's as different as it used to be.
yeah, when prices are like that, it almost makes sense for some native in the village to say, "Hey, I'm bringing a cow to town,"
Yeah, right?
just you know, or even grow your own wheat or something like that. I mean, you know, but yeah, I mean, when milk's that expensive, it's like there's easier ways.
Right. You'd think. But there's a lot of farmers that have goats, and they have goat milk. I have never tried goat milk, but I've
Uh,
had goat cheese, so
Good stuff.
Yeah. Have you had goat milk before?
No, I've
Okay.
had almond milk,
Oh
coconut
yeah.
milk,
Hmm.
uh,
Rice milk.
powdered milk.
Oh.
Uh,
Oh, that stuff is gnarly.
just normal store bought stuff. But yeah, I'm sure there's you can get goat milk and yak milk and orangutan milk. I'm sure you can get milk from just about everything. Cat milk.
I was just gonna say that.
Your little cat little nips.
And
I'm joking.
downhill it goes. Meow.
Uh, but I'm sure somewhere in the world there's every kind of milks.
Yeah, there is.
So,
Yeah, but it's interesting. I don't know. I think Alaska, there's a lot of the shows portray Alaska in different ways. So people have these ideas of Alaska that sometimes are a little bit off. Like the one that kind of frustrates me a little the most is the Alaskan Triangle, where they give some ridiculous number
mm,
for people that have gone missing, but they don't explain like that is the numbers that have gone missing. That's not the ones that were found. That's not the ones that were,
mm,
so that there was results from, so the numbers are skewed really. They're way off. And so it gives this
yeah, it can be.
impression that you come up to Alaska, you're going to go missing.
Yeah, like the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, yeah, but there is that kind of, never to be seen from lore up here too of people. Like, we have baggage, and I'm trying to remember who the other representative that, they still haven't even found the plane.
That could be like that one movie. I think it was called Alive. It's like a couple decades old. It was based off a true story of when I want to say they were the Chilean, or maybe it was Venezuelan. It was one of those South American countries that had
Yeah.
the Andes mountains. It was their soccer team that was flying home, and they crashed up in the mountains in the wintertime. And so there were survivors, and some of the people that were dead, they ended up eating them. So they turned to
Yeah.
cannibalism until spring came around. They could work their way off the mountains. Yeah, I mean, people crash. Up in Alaska, I could see people missing all the time. I mean, like people that try and climb the Denali. I'm sure there's a lot of bodies up there that haven't been found. Kind of thing because
Al climbed
people. Yep.
Denali.
What's that?
Al, Jake's best friend, Captain Al.
Hmm.
He's the one that has the Sirac, Joe's his D permit on that boat.
Okay.
But he's climbed Denali up and over and out. And yeah, he's even come upon some of the old Russian camps, from some of the climbers that have done that in the past, because there's very few that have done that.
Yep.
And he said it was brutal.
Yep.
Some of the worst parts that he was telling. Now, you keep in mind this is hardcore climbing, etc., etc. And he said the worst part was coming out and dealing with the mosquitoes in those swamp areas.
Ooh. Oh yeah. Yeah. I bet that'd be terrible. But I heard someone died like within the past few months up there trying to summit.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't, yeah. It's not like, I don't think it's like Everest where they can't get the bodies down,
Hmm.
so like Everest, the bodies that are up there, they're kind of like landmarks in a way. But
Well, hopefully they're pointing in the right direction. I'm just kidding. Okay. I mean, you don't want
not
them
that
pointing.
way.
You
Yeah.
know, I
So,
know that
have you heard of Portlock? That's on Patrick's bucket list.
Warlock is. No, I
It's
haven't heard.
outside of It's like towards Lake Iliamna, down in that area. It's considered the Kenai Peninsula still,
Hmm.
but it's way out there. And Port Chatham. The
So
guys
it's on the Kenai.
no,
Oh,
no, it's out in the waters, out in the big
oh, okay,
waters.
okay.
But that is the village where there's a lot of history
Hmm.
where the whole entire village now, it was not only mining, not only fishing, not only lumber, but they had all these industries going on there, right?
Hmm.
And all of them ended up just abandoning and leaving it.
Interesting.
And not because it had run out, but because they were run out by what they called the wild man and the, you know, Sasquatch. And so there's all these people that want to go there. And they've done a couple ventures there. But one of the first groups that went there ended up just staying on their boat. Like they never slept on land. And that to me was like, well, you kind of missed the whole exciting part there,
Hmm.
to me is
Yeah,
being
it
on the right
sounds
in the
like
thick of it.
they had stage fright. They didn't want to get off.
Yeah, I mean, because well, the stories are horrible.
Hmm.
Because, people would go out, hunters would show up, and their body parts would be coming down the river streams. And it
Hmm.
wasn't like bear attacks, where bears, they do pretty much similar ways of, no matter how a bear attacks you, they have similar ways of what they do.
Hmm.
Um, these were not. They were decapitated, torn apart limb from limb, just it
Something
that
was mad.
yeah, and equipment, like using equipment that no human would even be able to pick up and manipulate and, walloping people with
Hmm.
upside their head while their backs were turned. So for something to even to be able to pick up that kind of equipment and sneak up on someone and and deliver, a deadly blow. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not an easy feat. It's stuff like that that's really peculiar about this place. And so
Hmm.
there's a lot of places in there that people have gone and kinda checked out. There's even a show, I think it's on Discovery, I may be wrong, but, that are doing where the group is trying to bring their village back to that area. And I
Hmm.
watched some of it, and I wasn't too pleased with it because it's your typical,
Yep.
first show kinda drama, but, interesting though, either way.
I wonder if anybody had any autopsies done on the body parts, because obviously, if it was a animal attack, they'd be able to see, much like on metal, like when you're
Right.
cutting metal with the saw, you'd see the striations and stuff like that. So they'd be able to see how the bones,
Yep.
I mean, if the bones were cut or if they were like splintered apart, or
Yeah,
um, you
so
know,
Portlock at that time was pretty well developed,
mhm,
as far as Alaska, towns and stuff, go.
yeah,
So they were pretty well equipped with it, administering medical care and things like that at that time. It got to the point where the crew wouldn't, for the canneries and stuff, didn't want to go out there unless they had armed guards 24/7
hmm,
because of this thing. And the last person out of there was the postmaster.
hmm.
And the postmaster, he was there by himself and he kept seeing these dark shadow, of these beings just running around.
I'd be like, hell
And
no, don't
yeah,
leave me here by myself.
it's like, man, you
I
don't
left
have
you leaving
any friends.
a lot of
You don't
years,
have any
but
friends that would stay with you, huh?
I'm gonna need some weapons
So,
and some help setting up the defensive perimeter.
yeah.
And a few other things. And then once we get all that stuff,
Mhm.
well, you guys can leave, and I'll stay here by myself. But you don't just leave me.
Yeah, right. Right. I can't imagine. That'd be a
Just a
bit unnerving,
postman.
I
Come on,
think.
I only deal with the letters. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not a crook who has cleavers and shit. What am I gonna paper cut something
Right?
that's attacking me? But
His buddies are getting ripped to shreds, and I'm gonna give it a paper cut. You watch. Here, lick the glue.
the licks paper. The decapitated part. That's pretty interesting because
Mhm.
bears they when they're killing something they might sometimes decapitate. But as soon as the thing's dead, they either start eating it or they're not going to just continue. Oh, I forgot this limb and that limb and that limb. Um, and oh, let me toss this one in the river and then that one in the river.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that whole thing sounds. It'd be interesting if they did autopsies or whatever.
Yeah, so that's become, like, a real big hotspot where people want to come up here, and I think the hard thing for people to understand is how difficult it is to get into these remote places in Alaska, because they're not you can't drive to them. And even just boating out to them requires quite a journey, a lot of fuel, things like that, flying out there, all of these things, it's not easy to get to these places, and it does require a few hops either way.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how you try and get there, you're gonna take a few hops to get to that spot.
Well, not only that,
And
but you have to have lots of gear and prep
yeah,
time because you're going to be out there for a little bit.
right, there's not a there's no store around the corner. Yeah, what you bring is what you've got, and the weather can turn on you like that,
Yeah.
and when the dominoes start falling, like, one thing goes wrong, they crash hard and fast, and I think there's a lot of people that have these, fantasies of, coming up here, "Oh, I wanna go up there and do this and that," but there's a few that are quite, surprised when they visit Alaska and get a taste of just a little bit of what it has to offer straight out the gate.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen
Oh, good
there's a
night,
big
Polly.
misconception. Yeah, there's a big misconception about like you were saying, based off like the TV, what the people watch in the lower 48 watch on the TV shows.
Yep,
They have this misconception that Alaska is a certain way, but a lot of that's kind of the TV show adding some Hollywood to it.
yep. Now that's someone, he does a lot of tracking. He's like expert level tracker, and yeah, that's
Cool.
someone that you definitely wanna send out there. Like, I have, like, this idea of these dream teams, if I was to pull together, like, a dream team to
Mhm.
go out and do these expeditions with, like, full National Geographic style, where you're gone for as long as it takes.
It's cool.
Like, how long did it take them to get the snow leopard? I think it took them, like, 10 months of out there
I'll just
of
get the
just
footage. Yep.
yep, to get that footage, and that is some extreme dedication, and that's the kinda level I think it's gonna take to get the evidence that people are looking for. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for Woo. I can hear her snoring, but I don't see her.
She's out. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and she's got that, liquid, and so she makes those long, scary
Snores. Yeah.
sounds.
Now, plus she's old.
Mhm. Yeah, she's getting up there, little sweetie pie.
Yep.
I don't know where she is. I can hear her, but I can't see her. So I apologize for the snoring.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories about and I think you are right. Like with the snow leopard, the length of time that it takes to get an elusive target. It's kind of like
Right.
it's kind of like we talked before about wolverines. Like
Mhm.
when we were kids, 70s, 80s, There was no videos, there was no pictures. They were elusive and stuff like that. Legend, kind of.
Right.
Nowadays, you can find videos and pictures and stuff like that, but there's still, and I've scoured YouTube. I mean, there's very, very, very few videos of Wolverines actually attacking. And of those videos, it's like insane, how they are. But the fact that they're solitary creatures and stuff like that, it's I mean, in all my 29 years up in Alaska, I've never seen a wolverine. Seen bears, seen moose, seen
Mm.
wolves, seen eagles, seen all kinds of other things. Never once seen a wolverine. Seen a porcupine, yeah. Never seen a wolverine.
Oh,
But
I've had a
so that the
Wolverine
point.
experience. Hold on, hold on.
Oh yeah, I could imagine, not fun. But yeah, I think you're right as far as length of time. I mean, snow
Mhm.
leopard, you know, 10 months to just to get footage of it.
Yep.
I'm sure a wolverine would be the same thing. I'm sure Bigfoot or any other name based on geographical location. I'm sure it's going to take a long time too,
Yeah.
especially if they're I mean, by all the descriptions I've heard, it leads me to believe they're mammals.
Yep.
And in maybe a cousin of ours or primates or something like that. Who knows? Um, but that would lead me to believe, if that was the case, that they would be intelligent. It's pretty much
Mhm.
humans and primates are some of the smartest creatures on the planet. I mean, of course, there's dolphins and octopus and other creatures that are smart too, but or ravens. But so Bigfoot, Sasquatch, a Yeti, whatever region. I'm guessing that if they're primate or mammal, they just did what humans and other mammals have done, just spread out to these parts of the world and adapted to the climate, whatever, and
Yeah,
maybe
and they definitely have a skill set we don't, and as people that spend I even myself, I've become so far removed, like, remember how much time I used to spend out in the woods? Like, I'd work really hard, but after work, I was gone.
hmm
And as far removed as I could get, and those skills, were just right at the tip of my fingers for me, but even now and, chemo brain, all that kinda stuff kinda messes with your memory pretty brutally, and, all of that stuff I've gone through, irregardless, it's still that stuff seems like those skills, if you don't stay on top of it, you kinda lose it. But when you're out in the elements and you're out in the woods, there's skill sets you acquire really quickly. Your senses, you pick up all these different, your ability to smell seems to be heightened when you're out there for lengths of time, and, and you just become more agile, it seems, and physically different when you spend time out in nature, you know?
I think a lot of it has to do with um, the plants, because like for example, trees are some of the biggest creators of oxygen on the planet. I mean, obviously there's a lot of oxygen that comes from the oceans as well, but in the cities, not as much. But when you're out in the wilderness, you're surrounded by these oxygen factories,
Yeah.
and the air quality is just so much better and stuff like that. And you know, uh, so I think the trees have an impact even beyond the oxygen. There's just being in nature, it really, um, I think most uh, civilization has lost their connection with nature to some
Yeah.
extent. We've
There's
pulled
some
ourselves out of the
resonance.
wild, so most people don't have the skill set to be able to survive, you know,
Hey,
uh,
Eric.
out in the wild kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's just this beauty resonance in nature that it doesn't matter what kind of mood you're in. It doesn't You could be in a really horrible mood, have the worst day on the planet, and then you can go and sit out in nature and, after just a few moments and just really taking it all in, it kind of those that anger, that whatever you're feeling, fear, anxiety, kinda just dissipates.
Mhm.
and there is something, they say the term grounding, but there is something grounding about being in nature. Yet there's a lot of people who have never spent any time in nature and are
Mhm.
absolutely terrified of it. Those to me, I don't understand that. To me, that is really baffling. But, there's people that would be in hysterics to have to try and stay, like, out here at the cabin at night surrounded by trees, surrounded in the woods, they
You know
just
what?
lose it.
Yeah, you know what boggles my mind is I've actually come across people here in Orlando that have never been outside of Orlando. And I'm like, you've never been to the beach? Cocoa Beach, 50 minutes away. You've never been to Cocoa Beach. Never been outside of Orlando. I'm like, how the heck? And they're adults. I'm like,
That
it boggles my mind. Um,
yeah.
I did want to say something about, like you were saying, grounded,
Mhm.
being grounded. There was this show I watched about, I think it's called Mycelium.
Oh, yes.
It's the fungus that's in all the ground of all the earth, wherever there's plants. Obviously, if it's not in the Sahara Desert because there's no plants, but
Pulse.
it's the stuff like if you ever buy plants at like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, some store bought plant, you take it home. Usually within a few days of watering it, you'll see this like thin white hair-like stuff growing on the top of the soil. Have you ever
Oh,
seen
yep.
that?
Yep, yep, yep.
That's mycelium. It's a fungus,
Yes.
and it connects all plants. You know, and what it's doing is it's like a bartering system. So it gets certain nutrients from the plants, but it's also transporting things to the plant. And it's really interesting that it goes on. I mean, they found mycelium networks that go on for miles and miles and miles. I mean, as far as they just keep following it and stuff like that, and it's just one big network.
Yes.
You know, and
And
it
what's interesting is the communication that they're able to find that takes place in that as well. It's almost like our, spinal cord fluid and stuff,
mm,
how it all of the information, it doesn't matter if it's a tree, if it's a plant, it it can pick up that information, and it's a part of a communication that they're just learning about, and I find that so fascinating, and
mm,
we are so out of touch. What if there is a species of that is not us humans, but a type of human that is able to tap into that communication? Could
mm.
you imagine? Like
Yeah, that the so like think of one tree and how many cells are in that one tree since it's a
right?
living organism. And an interesting thing is I was actually watching this earlier today. They
Hi,
uh,
Strangeland.
they looked at a portion of a leaf under a microscope when after they gave it salt water. It was a leaf that needed fresh water, not salt water, and they showed the cells shrinking within the tree. So it looked almost like a lattice of you know fiber,
Mhm,
and then you can see the individual cells all shrinking and stuff like that. So when you think about how many cells are in a tree,
right.
and when they're doing photosynthesis and converting sunlight to energy and all that stuff, and all the stuff they're moving around, and then you think of the mycelium network that connects all the trees and plants in one forest. That mycelium network's like, has to be like a huge giant brain because it's
Yes.
transporting, you know,
Bingo.
all the
Yeah.
tens of thousands of trees and plants. It's transporting stuff amongst all of those. And then you think about all the cell levels of the mycelium network. One of the things I remember on that show that I was watching about mycelium is they say anywhere you step in a planted area, anywhere you step in your yard with grass, anywhere there's plants that you you're standing on mycelium.
Yes.
That's everywhere.
That's him. Thank you, Strangeland. Paul Stamets. Now he fascinating individual, and he has this amazing way to make you fall in love with mushrooms.
Yep. Oh yeah. Mushrooms are really interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
as a species, because they're not plant, not like a tree,
Right.
and they're not, a vegetable or fruit or whatever. I mean, they're fungi, but some really interesting things, because the mycelium is basically in that same family as fungi and mushrooms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But mushrooms are like the fruit of the fungi world.
Do you remember in WoW, what was that land that had all the big giant mushrooms?
Oh, that was over in Outland.
Out
Yeah, the expansion before Lich King.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can't remember because I only got to dabble in it just a short time before the next expansion came out, but I love
uh,
that place. But they're saying that there was a point in time when our oxygen levels were different here on our planet, and that the
Zanger Marsh.
mushrooms. What was it?
Zanger Marsh.
Yes, Zanger Marsh, yes.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, mushroom. Yeah, where mushrooms were different.
but they were saying that the mushrooms. Oh, we just lost Derek. He went into WoW. He'll be back in a minute. But there was a place in this game, WoW, if you're not familiar with it, is, World of Warcraft. Him and I used to play. There was a whole group of us. I had a
Sorry about that.
guild. That's okay. I figured you're
I was
well
on dual
fired up.
monitors and I was trying to close one. I closed the wrong
It's
one.
like, I'm going in.
I'm a novice here. This is my first time using a computer.
It's awesome. Thanks for joining me, though. That's
Yep.
cool.
So
But
the last part that I heard you talk about back in the past the mushrooms and I missed what
yeah.
happened
So
to
they
that.
were saying that there was a point in time where our oxygen levels were much different
Mhm.
and that the mushrooms were huge, just like they were in Zanger Marsh, like
So
tree level.
that'd be back during Pangea when all the continents were together in one big landmass, and there was no ice anywhere on the planet, and the most common plant would be a fern, but then there was palm trees and all kinds of other things. So it was all swampy, marshy,
Yes.
tropical
Mhm.
rainforest kind of thing. So yeah, I could see lots and lots of mushrooms, and the fact that it was basically just summertime all the time,
Yeah.
so fungi would be growing like crazy.
You could just no one would ever starve. Like those mushrooms would be so
Nobody would ever get anything done though.
Yeah, especially if you're eating the funny mushrooms. It's a magical mushroom ride. Oh my goodness. Oh, jeez.
That civilization would have taken a quite a different
I bet
turn.
that's a hard left.
Everybody would have been dressed like Keebler elves,
Oh my goodness.
all kinds of colors
Uh,
everywhere.
Yeah, could you imagine?
Yep, yep.
Uh, that'd be funny. But it's interesting though, like when you think about that communication that takes place in the forest.
Mhm.
And, that's just between our trees and our plants and mushrooms and, using that mycelium. They're also finding that the mycelium is strong enough that they can use it as armor almost, and they're finding different ways that they can use it because
That
it's
wouldn't
so
surprise me.
strong.
They kind of like spider silk.
Yeah.
It makes sense because or like you were pointing out, like our nerves, in the
Hmm.
spine and whatnot. You know, some fiber optic style, you know, thing that's transporting.
Yeah. It, yeah. It, it seems like the spinal fluid carries so much more, and they're constantly learning about all of it. And the more
Mhm.
that they find out is, so intriguing and so impressive. And now they're realizing that the mycelium, is doing all of this. And I don't know if you've heard that study where this gentleman, and I cannot remember the professor, but he was doing a study on plants and if they actually communicated with one another. And this is separate from the mycelium. This is a completely separate study. And so he had all these plants in different pots and stuff. And he happened, and this is where his study went and took a hard right. But he went and happened to have lunch in his lab where the plants were. And he was
Mhm.
eating a salad. And the plants were responding to him eating other plants. And he thought at first, like, no, 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 I just got to be imagining this in one way or another. And so the more that he started digging into that, the more that he found out that they were actually responding to him. And
Mhm.
it's a very interesting study and definitely worthwhile looking into and going down that rabbit hole. But he got to a
Yeah.
point where he would talk to them,
Mhm.
and thank them and all of these different things, and they would respond differently, you know? It was quite intriguing.
I would venture to say that they have some kind of unknown intelligence.
Yes.
They don't have brains like we know them or whatever, but they're living. Um, there's two things I want to say. One, I remember seeing a show about grass that that like if you're mowing your grass and you
Mhm.
smell that fresh cut grass smell,
Yeah.
that's the chemical response that the grass is putting out when it's under duress.
Oh,
That's not to us. It's like, oh, I love the fresh cut grass smell. That's grass telling grass elsewhere, hey, we're being cut, kind of thing, supposedly. Now,
fascinating. Oh,
now
I haven't heard that.
I'll look it up for you and find the link. And then this other
Sweet.
one, I'll have to look this one up as well. So there's this tree in Australia, it's, in a wooded area, got
Okay.
struck by lightning,
Oh,
and so most of the tree broke off. Because and all that was left was just a little tiny bit sticking up out of the ground, just the stump, and it was being kept alive by the other trees around it. They found out that the other trees were donating, um, resources or chemicals
yes.
or whatever to this stump to keep it alive.
I heard about that. Again, it really makes you take a second and pause on
Mhm.
how we treat the planet. We don't even most times even think twice about cutting down a tree.
Yeah, yeah. Trees. I mean, I've seen some pretty crazy trees. I mean, like, I've seen some huge oak trees where their branches just go
Oh, yeah.
hundreds of feet. Um, but take the tree, the oldest tree in the world. I think it was called nicknamed General Sherman or something like that. It's like up in the mountains in California, and it's said to be like 10,000 years old. Just think of
Oh,
what that tree has seen. You know,
wow, right. Oh my goodness. That yeah, just the memory that it holds within its own body and its trunk and oh man.
all the rings.
Yes.
It probably has historical records. Much like
Mhm.
ice cores, how they show a
Mhm.
historical record of air qualities and stuff like that. A lot of interesting things. It's cool. All the stuff that they keep finding out. The
Yeah.
further along we go, the more and more we keep finding out. That just keeps boggling
This
the
is
mind.
an interesting comment from Strangeland, and this is someone that has some intriguing um, encounters himself. But I was at a local nature area that has a lot of old growth. I saw a small mushroom move, so I looked closer, and there was a little hole almost closed in. Inside was a large wasp, late fall.
I
So
bet
he was
it's
thinking that
this
it
mushroom
was
is shaped like like a lattice, like a honeycomb kind of round thing.
mhm.
It swells up and it has a sweet kind of smell in there that lures in insects. and then it kind of shrinks on down, almost like a Venus flytrap. You know how it closes.
Really?
Those mushroom, once it has it, it shrinks on down and eats them. I forget what
So
they call it.
Strangeland was watching a mushroom eating a wasp. Awesome. Wow, you saw something that is rare apparently there. Interesting.
Yeah, it's called. Oh, that's the wrong one.
So Eric, aka the Purple Hobbit abroad, I believe Michigan has the largest or one of the largest living organisms in the world. It is a group of aspens or some tree such and like. Yes, the aspen tree has been said that it is the largest single living organism. And there's some mushrooms in Oregon, I believe, on a mountaintop in Oregon that is
Hmm,
one solid organism as well.
interesting.
I'm the same way, Strangeland. I don't even like to cut the grass. I have a grass. My family is going nuts right now because I haven't been cutting my grass, and it's up to my face. My mom was calling my nephews like, "You need to go out there and mow your aunt's grass," and I'm telling them no.
Any
They're like,
fireweeds amongst
no.
the grass? Any fireweed?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
I'm so excited. The whole hillside is just there's so much fireweed blooming right now.
Oh, I
I
bet that
can't
looks good.
wait. Yeah,
Maybe
so for my
good pic.
birthday, I always take a picture inside the fireweed with my
Mhm.
cape and all my pinkness on.
A hat.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited because this year it is everywhere. Looks wonderful, and the wild roses are growing nuts up here. It's a really hot summer. So
Oh,
the
that
raspberries aren't doing so well, but the other stuff's kicking off pretty
are
nice.
gonna be a lot of bugs.
Mm, yeah, the skeeters are with vengeance this year.
Ooh, I don't miss mosquitoes.
Uh-uh. No, no, no.
Don't miss them.
But it is interesting though when you think about all the potentials that a forest being would have or
Hmm.
could have, if they were able to tap into these communications or pick up certain frequencies, vibrations, resonance.
Hmm.
And that's what when they break glass, when a singer gets to a certain point and that's the thing is it's a resonant, you know, and that's something that Nikola Tesla loved to play with. Got himself in trouble a few times with it.
That earthquake machine.
Yes.
Hmm.
And he said many times that he knew the exact frequency to bring down buildings, to break the earth apart, things
Hmm.
to that nature, and a very intriguing person
Oh,
altogether.
yeah, some really really cool contributions to science.
Yes.
Really cool.
And it's like we're just, for whatever reasons, I think I think he was doing something similar to like a spirit box. It almost that's what I think of when look back at what he was working on and when Westinghouse and everything started to pull away from him, and he
Hmm.
kind of was like they thought he was a little cuckoo at that point. But he I think that was something that he was working on because he was talking about talking to spirits and the other world and things to that nature, and I find some of his work in that regard needs a little bit more light. We should look into it a little bit more and kind of see what he was dabbling into and what he actually discovered.
Well, you know that saying that all matter that is around right now has always existed. You can't
Yes.
destroy matter. You can convert it from one form to another. So, like for example, if you have wood and you light it on fire, and some of it will go off as smoke, some will be ash, some of it will be the radiant heat. I mean, there will be a lot of different ways that this wood, the molecules get broken up. If you were able to contain all of that stuff, you have all the molecules that in order to be able to rebuild that piece of wood.
Yeah.
So it's just you're just transforming it from one form to another. Now, let's say people, how there's all we have all these stories and legends about the spirit world and people seeing ghosts and this and other dimensions and blah blah blah. Well, what's to say that us, since we're electricity in a lot of ways, we have electricity flowing through our brains. That gives us our electromagnetic field, or some people would call it an aura, whatever.
Yeah.
When we die and stuff like that, we have to the stuff that makes us up has to transform into some other states too, because you can't destroy the matter that makes us up. It just transforms into a different state.
Yeah. It is it it's pretty funny. It's
Yep.
it's interesting though, because there's that talk like you could technically still have pieces of like George Washington
Mhm. Oh yeah.
hanging around.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, remember that I was telling you earlier about the Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was talking about how small molecules are. He said, you have a glass of water. There's more molecules in there than there are glasses of water in all the oceans. He then also said there's more molecules in a breath of air than there are breaths of air on the entire planet. And then he further goes on to say, when you drink water, you're going to expel it back into the environment in a number of different ways. Mist in your exhale, sweat, urine, whatever, and then that goes back into the environment, gets recycled or whatever. And same thing with when you inhale air and then you exhale it. All those molecules go out there, and so he said, when you drink water or you inhale, you could be absorbing a molecule of someone that lived, thousands of years ago, like Caesar or Jesus or whoever it may be, anybody. And, and somebody down the road might inhale molecules that you exhale. So all that stuff's, going out there. Now, the other interesting thing is if we tie this back into plants, well, plants inhale what we exhale. you know, we inhale oxygen, exhale was it carbon dioxide. They inhale carbon dioxide, exhale oxygen. So you're talking about that the guy who talked to his plants and seen the reaction or whatever. Well, if I exhale or carbon dioxide, the molecules that are coming out of me are being absorbed by the tree, and now they have whatever's in there, the DNA, the RNA, and all that stuff.
Right.
And what's to say they're not holding on that memory, kind of like water can hold on to a memory of a shape, and then the tree exhales the oxygen out, and then that's inhaled by someone else, and then the cycle just rinse and repeat, whatever. And so I think there's a lot to things, and I actually went off on a tangent on this line of thinking before. Like when we have dreams,
Mhm.
at nighttime, your dreams could be just a mishmash of people and places. Some of them might have been places that you've been to, people
Right.
you met, and then some of it might just be people that you don't know and places that you don't know. Well, what if when you're asleep at night and your body's basically a receiver, you know, of the energies that you're absorbing and the air that you're inhaling. What if I inhale a molecule from someone I've never met, and then I have a dream, and then they appear in my dream, and,
Oh.
and I'm like, oh, I don't know this person, and or what if I'm absorbing the energy from someone, because like where I live right now, I have neighbors that aren't too far away, and they've appeared in my dreams a couple times,
Oh.
you know, not just once, but a couple times. Of course, throughout my lifetime, people that I know have been in my dreams more than people I don't know, kind of thing. Probably because I was around then inhaling their molecules and stuff like that.
Yes, that
And
is so interesting when you
that's the brain trying to figure out, you know, reorganize the information and stuff like that the best way it could.
yeah,
And the same thing of locations, because there's been times where, like most recently, about last year, and Naomi was down here. Where was this? No, it was October of last year when I was over in Albuquerque
okay,
visiting Naomi. We went to this place where it had a parking garage, and the parking garage had a certain layout of its ramp system, and it was kind of like a architectural element kind of thing. And I've seen that before in a dream, but it was the first time I've ever been there in my life, kind of thing. And it was the weirdest thing, you know. So I actually been to a place that I dreamed about. Now that's only ever happened to me like a couple times. That was the most recent time, and that was last year. Um, but there's a lot of weird things um,
so
that I think.
Eric
Hmm? What's
asked
that?
if you've ever read Pierce Anthony
No, I have not.
because he wrote a horror book called Shade of the Tree. It deals with much of what we are talking about.
Well, I probably inhaled some of his carbon dioxide and probably had that, thought in my mind. It's
Right?
what you know how there's that thing we all have called instinct,
Yes.
or
Intuition.
intuition, stuff like.
Hmm.
I mean, some of that I assume is passed down from our parents in the DNA. So at the moment of conception, or up until the point in time where you're birthed, then you're no longer getting any more DNA from mother, kind of thing, unless breastfeeding or whatever. But
Hmm.
at the moment of conception, that's when you stop getting any more DNA from your father. So the DNA, as you know, has, or from what I understand it, every experience you ever had in your whole life, every smell, every thought, every sound, everything is all encoded in there, everything about you.
Yes.
And so, if that's true, then that means at the moment of conception, you got all the way up until that point of your father, and then during the 9 months, and whatever you get of your mother. But then after that, then you're on your own, to build your own experiences or whatever. So I'm guessing that some of the intuition or instinct is what you gained from the DNA from your parents, but then other bits of it might be stuff that you're absorbing through, from like other people around the world, like
Hmm.
through the air, the water, energy, or whatever.
Well, when I tore my ACL, I tore it completely in half, like completely. It was just like it was just someone took a scalpel and so the doctor was telling me there was a few options that I could go with to repair it,
Mhm.
and one of them was I could use the that ACL from a cadaver,
Mm.
and that I don't know, I got really weirded out by that thought, so I ended up just using part of my own patella for my ACL, but
Mhm.
um, there are a lot of people who have had these surgeries where they've used other another person's body part or whatever, and they've experienced memories or dreams or certain things
Mhm.
from that
Because they're absorbing
person.
the DNA
Yes.
of whoever the host was.
Hmm. And isn't I just find that kind of stuff very intriguing. And with the amount of blood transfusions and platelet transfusions and stuff that I've had to undergo myself, I was so freaked out by that. I was kind of worried there for a while. Like, am I even going to have my own
You know,
DNA anymore? Or what's happening? Am I like 50 different people now? Maybe that's
well,
what's wrong with me.
I would say yes. I would say, yeah, you're the combination of all that you absorbed. You know,
Mhm.
even not just from the people. I mean, think of all the just floating in the air right now, all the
Right.
germs, bacteria, and everything that we're being bombarded with, every moment. You know.
Yeah. It's just incredible, though. It really I find that stuff very so intriguing that there's so much we don't understand about our world that we've had so much time to observe, to look into, to research, and we're constantly learning new things,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
like Eric, yeah, our spiritual side, that has almost become like a taboo thing on many places. In the metaphysics world, it's something that scientists love to dabble in. But it seems like in your mainstream science communication, they don't even wanna talk about it a lot of times, and it's
Hmm.
kind of a shame. It's almost like we're missing out on such a, vibrant part of life itself,
Hmm.
like this the true spice of life, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of like, I mean, me since I do a lot of graphics.
Mhm.
I also do a lot of audio. I've learned like with audio, there's frequencies, and you could actually
Right?
plot that out, and you could see all the different ranges. Like the human ear, average for the average person could that go from 50 hertz up to 21,000 kilohertz. Dogs could go higher than that, like that's where the dog whistle range is. And then you look at things like the spectrum of light. You can plot that out in very much the same way as you can sound. From infrared to ultraviolet, and visible light's just this really tiny little thing in the middle. We can't see X-rays or gamma rays or infrared or ultraviolet. We need special tools for that kind of stuff. But if you look at it as a chart or a graph or whatever, the invisible light's just this really thin area, but same thing with sound. I mean, we can only hear from 50 hertz to 21,000 kilohertz, but we know that it goes down to zero, and that's the sounds that you feel in your chest, but you don't hear. And then we know that it goes higher than 21,000 because that's where the range of animals get into. So if you plot it all out, humans can only hear a little tiny slither and see a little tiny slither. Um, you know, Now that new telescope, the James Webb, has all these instruments where it could see mainly in infrared because that could see through dust clouds and stuff like that. But what if there's a spectrum, in order to see things like the spiritual side? See, we're only seeing things based on the human eye, which can only see the visible.
Right.
But we know that you know from history, people talk about auras, this field going
Mhm.
around you. Well, of course, Nikolai Tesla, he found that connection between electricity and magnetism. That if you have one, you have the other.
Right.
Um, and so it would stand to reason that since we have electrical impulses flowing through our bodies, that we would also have this magnetic field around us, or aura, or whatever you want to call it. And it's like if you're in an office situation, one of your colleagues comes in, you know, you could almost, the sensation where you could tell that that person's in a bad mood,
Yeah.
or or that they're negative or whatever. You get this certain vibe. Someone walks into a room and you're like, oh shit, you know, even before they say anything or have an expression on their face. What if that's not just some weird feeling, mate? What if it's
Right.
really you're feeling the electricity from a distance kind of thing? Because
Yeah.
electric fields can get big. I mean, look at the Earth. Our electric, the magnetic field around the Earth is huge.
Mhm.
So I mean, our fields might be bigger than just a little aura, thin aura. It could be bigger than
They're finding now that there's some photography they can do, and I
that.
wanna go try this because there's a spot in, on the coast in Oregon that they have one of these cameras that you can go and get supposedly the picture of your aura.
Hmm.
And I would love to see, does it change by my mood, things like that, and just test it out and see. I find that so intriguing.
Yeah, the as far as like spiritual side, I mean,
Mm,
I'm still a learner on a lot of that stuff. I mean, of course, I got my crystals and got my books and cards and all kinds of other
yeah,
things, and learned a lot of things along the way. But and even seen things, like little tests. Like there's this one, those art
5
pieces
nickels.
where you look at it a certain way, like cross-eyed or whatever, and the image pops out at you. But if you look at it just straight on, it just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook.
Right.
Kind of art piece. I remember this one spiritual test. It was an image, and you were supposed to stare at it for like 10 seconds, and whatever color comes out is supposed to be like your spirit color or whatever. And
Oh,
they also say that sometimes you'll see things like little waves in the color. And for me, mine was like a drop of water and the ripple going outward kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that just kind of intrigues me. I don't know if what's
21
behind it.
grams.
What's that?
That's the movie. 21 grams.
21
They did a
grams.
movie about when a person dies, they lose a certain amount of weight, and it's with everyone. It's 21 grams without fail, and they can't figure out why, what it is about it. But this is
It's how much the
something.
soul weighs.
That's what they're like. That's what a lot of people are thinking, that it's the soul leaving the body.
Hmm.
But it's
Well,
really interesting. It is something. There's so much out there that we do not know yet.
well, yeah.
When they do start looking into it and get some of this information, it's almost like it's just like squashed and kept under wraps and
Yeah.
not allowed into the mainstream and into the main consciousness for people to absorb. And have you heard of the 100th monkey effect?
Yes. Yeah.
I that to me is another example of things that are so far out of our natural, like, thinking realm, that there is obviously something above and beyond. Like,
Mhm.
it's whether it's a collective consciousness, something, because that 100th monkey effect is consistent, and no matter how many times they test it, it tests the same every single time.
Mhm. Yeah, there's just so many mind-boggling things out there. I mean, I have so
Mhm.
many question marks always floating around my head, and and I know most of them will be there when I'm dead, kind of thing. It would be nice to have answers to a lot of the questions. I mean, there's so many questions. I mean, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs or
Right.
how big's the universe, or I mean, what about our spirits and souls and blah blah blah. Um, but I think if you try to think of things from like a logical standpoint or a scientific
Mhm,
standpoint, you could almost make sense of some things. Like you were talking about the what was it, 21 grams
mhm.
when we die. Well, what is a person's soul? I mean, when they die, all of the electrical impulses eventually stop. All the cells don't stop because there's still motion going on and still things happening for a little while. I mean, the body doesn't completely. It's not like just turning off a computer. Your brain might fade, kind of thing, but is the soul the electrical energy that's passing through us at any given time? Is it something else? You know, but like
Mhm.
if you think of the electricity that's flowing through us at any one given time, I mean, just the amount of for me to do all this with my hand, that's a lot of crazy impulses going on simultaneously, traveling at the speed of light. Many different times for me to do that. Electricity. You know, wouldn't that have some kind of mass? I mean, if we get down to the quantum level of things, you know. everything has mass except for
Yep.
photons.
Right.
And then
Are
I
they a
think there's
wave?
more.
Are they a particle? We don't know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, have I told you about the thing it was like a few months ago. I learned this thing about photons.
Hmm.
Um, that is crazy. So a photon, is traveling at the speed of light. And they say, the faster you move, the slower you age. Or the slower time moves for you. So people traveling around the world, on the space station, they're traveling at like 17, 18, 19,000 miles an hour because they make it around the Earth in like an hour and a half or some shit like that. And so time's moving slower for them because they're moving faster. And
Yeah.
they say the
Oh,
faster you
right.
go, time moves slower. If you were able to get to the moving at the speed of light, Einstein theorized this when he was riding on a bus through a village, and he turned to look at the clock, and he imagined if he was traveling at the speed of light away from the clock, how would the hands of the clock move, and they'd basically stop. The hands would stop. And so um, basically, a photon, when it's created in the center of our sun, it bounces around whatever, and then when it leaves the sun, it takes like 8, 9 minutes to get from the sun here to Earth, and it might be, it keeps moving until it is absorbed by something, so like your eyeball or a telescope or something like that. So to the photon, though, that journey happened all at the same time because time stops for the photon because it's moving at the speed of light. So it's born and is absorbed at the exact same time. So it traveled that whole distance. And it's the same thing for a photon from the furthest galaxies that we ever seen from like 13 billion years ago. They're born and they do that journey, and then they're absorbed by our telescopes here on Earth into the photon. All that happened at the same exact second,
Yes.
exact moment. And so the point is, if photons do that, if time stops for them, and they could traverse the universe, and they don't age, that means the fountain of youth isn't a fountain in the traditional sense of liquid, it's photons. So if you want to beat the age thing, you have to actually become a photon because nothing that has mass can travel the speed of light. So
So intriguing. And it seems like there's, again, that search for all these different avenues. A lot of people want to live forever. I couldn't imagine wanting to live forever, but there are a lot of people that, they've frozen their bodies and done all these things for the hope of being able to come back. And I think we've saved brains, things like that, in the hope that we will be able to do something with this at some point as a species.
that the crazy thing is, yeah, they're doing all the wrong things in
Yes.
doing this. And what they need to do is figure out how to convert it to light. Because like,
Yes.
and here's something else that's weird. Now, all that stuff I was telling you about the photon, I seen that on, I believe, a Neil deGrasse Tyson Star Talk episode.
Okay.
Um, he talks about a lot of that stuff. Um, and then there's another scientist who talked about the photons as well. So I got some of the bits from both of them.
Okay.
I'll have to look at the name of the other one. Um, but the interesting thing is when I was watching and gathering this information, I started thinking, well, isn't in a lot of the old historical religious text, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or the Sumerian text or whatever, they'd all talk about beings coming down from the sky and they'd be made out of light and stuff like that. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
in some texts they'd call them angels or this or that or whatever, and they would be immortal, they'd live forever, kind of thing. It's like, well, it makes sense because they're made out of photons, you know, and maybe ancient peoples were onto something,
Hmm.
that is just another one of the many unexplained things. How is it that they more or less described scientifically how it would have actually had to have been? The only thing that can live forever is light. You know?
Well, they've some of those, ancient script, like the Sumerian tablets and things like that, they've looked at some of that script and just recently have, realized that it is the exact same formation. Like, it has this
Bible.
cone
Mhm,
type shape,
mhm,
and it almost looks like a funnel,
mhm,
and that is the exact same shape when you see stars forming and things of light.
mhm,
And so it's almost where they are considering and they're redirecting the way that they're looking at this language as a language of light. And that is really opening up all these different um, perspectives that they, missed completely. But
mhm,
once they were able to get a closer look with some of these telescopes and things like that, and were able to see these patterns, and that to me, again, it makes you wonder, like, what kind of technology did our ancestors actually have that's been lost to time?
That's something I've thought about quite a lot. So I think in one of our talks before, I had mentioned about the Great Pyramid in Egypt and the Pyramid of the Sun
Mhm.
in Mexico. Um, now these they're obviously separated by the Atlantic Ocean, but the interesting thing is the base of both pyramids, perfect square. If you measure the foundation, they're exactly the same measurement down to the millimeter. And then the height of the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico is exactly half the height of the Great Pyramid, all the way down to the millimeter. And so the math between these two pyramids seem very, very similar. I mean, the odds that these peoples, that far apart would be like, oh, hey, let's build a pyramid,
Right.
and let's make them the same, basically the same measurements and same build style.
Dimensions and yeah.
Seems a little too coincidental. Unless you take South America and you move it and put it like the jigsaw puzzle to Africa, like we've all seen in elementary school, back when all the continents were connected as Pangea. Then the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico and the Great Pyramid are all of a sudden like really, really close and at the same latitude. Because you just basically eliminate the whole Atlantic Ocean. You just bring the continents together.
Interesting.
And so one of the things I was thinking of is, well, what if the history is like way, way off? What if these structures, because there's pyramids on every continent, including
Mhm.
Antarctica,
And they're
um,
finding more.
all the time,
Yeah.
even underwater. What if
Mhm.
all that stuff was built when all the continents were connected? Because the odds of all these tribes of people being separated by oceans and having no communication, all of a sudden, hey, let's build the same structure. You know,
Right.
and let's orient it with the stars and the light and solstice and this and that, whatever, and equinox. And it's like the math and the science, but it just seems way too hard to comprehend that all these unconnected civilizations thought of the same thing at the same time. But what if it was all done as Pangea, hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago? And maybe what happened to the historical records was, something similar to the dinosaurs. Maybe not as bad. The dinosaurs were made extinct for the most part. What if there was like some near level extinction level event that occurred in the past that almost wiped out humans? There's survivors here or there, and but
Mhm.
the stories of the civilization before the event, they maintained and they passed it down to the newer generations, and it eventually became bedtime stories and legends and stuff, things like Atlantis and blah blah blah, you know, and all the religious stories. What if all these things were things that weren't just myth and legends? What if they
Right.
were all interconnected in some way? You know.
Well, it's like the different animals that have been found on these structures as well that
Mhm.
are not from those regions. And so for them to even be able to depict these carvings is just baffling by many, you know, how? How are they finding, even some of the mounds that they've come across where you can only see them from the air.
Yeah, like Serpent Mound in Ohio,
Mhm.
or the was it Aztec lines in South America, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and it makes
Or
again,
not
it
an
goes
Aztec
back
line,
to
or
that
Aztec.
collective consciousness, and are is there some, like, shamans and different people claim that they can tap into this. There's some that call it the Akashic records, things to that, um, nature, and it
Mm.
makes I don't know if forest beings, again, going back to, like, Sasquatch and the ability to have, capabilities beyond what we as, humans now know and are capable of doing. Maybe they have all of this ability that has been lost completely through time.
Have you heard of this site that they discovered in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe?
Yes.
That so the interesting thing is, they're still excavating
Yep.
it. And so it was discovered in 1963, and they didn't really start the excavation until decades later. Um, but the story that I've heard is that some like goat herder, sheep herder, whatever, was taking their herd, you know, through this valley and up this hill, and they seen sticking up out of the dirt the corner of looked like a man-made block.
Right.
It was most of it was still under the dirt, but you could tell it had a 90-degree angle here and a 90-degree. It looked like the corner of something that was cut. And so they get down on their knees and they start brushing away the dirt, and they see that it just kept going down deeper. And then they report it, and they brought in like some German or some Eastern European archaeologists who came over there and started digging. They found out that it was the top corner of a big monolithic
Massive.
stone. Yeah, kind of as tall, but not as heavy as like the Stonehenge type stones.
Mhm.
They had a carving of an animal on it, and then they
Mhm.
found that there was other stones, and then they eventually found out that there was dozens and dozens of these stones, and they're set up in concentric circles. And it's so they excavated a portion of the side of this hill, and so I heard that they did lidar, which is laser radar, and they found out that the entire hill is the complex. And so one of the puzzles is, um, why did they bury the site? Because they said that all the structures are perfectly intact, standing up, which would lead them to believe it wasn't from like a volcano exploding, because obviously the wind would have knocked everything down. So they think that the peoples hand buried it,
Purposely.
purposely
Yes.
buried it in order to preserve it, protect it from erosion, wind, and water, and all that stuff. But the interesting thing is, they date it back to thousands of years older than the Great Pyramids. It's like 2 to 3 times older, going back to the last ice age, kind of thing. And it's like, well, okay, so this is a site that they found within the last 100 years, and it just extended the known history books by 2 to 3 times. You know, what else is out there that's going to extend it back even further? Much like Pyramid of the Sun and Great Pyramid, like those talking.
Right. It's again, I keep saying it, but there's so much we don't know, and then you look back at book burnings. To me, that it's just that gets under my nerves. But what
Mm-hmm.
did we lose? Like, what knowledge is known by a certain group? I hate to get into that mindset, but I can't help but think that there are some people that know. Like, there's a group of people that know our history. They know what's really going on. They know
I
what
think they know.
Gobekli Tepe was. They know why it was buried. They know, you know?
Yeah, I think it's it's why would they if they know why wouldn't they disclose it? It's probably because it
Mhm.
would be something that would cause the peoples to mass hysteria and panic or whatever. So it sounds to me like it's not something of you know living happily ever after kind of thing. It sounds like it's like a doom and gloom type story. Um, but it does make one wonder when you look at a lot of the archaeological sites,
Right.
how advanced they were. Like there's one in South America called Pumapunku, I think it is, the one where they have these geometrical big big blocks. I mean, they weigh tons, and they have
Right.
holes that are cut into them, like almost like a ice core sample, and you can see the striations of the drill going all the way down the hole, like it was cut through the stone like that. It's like and we're talking these were like granite stones, and in modern days, if, to cut granite, they're going to use like industrial diamonds. Not like the diamonds that you'd find on a ring, but they'd be diamonds nonetheless. The
Mhm.
tips of the blades. And so, what did the ancient people? Because normally, if you're going to cut something, you need something stronger than that to cut it. You know,
Right.
you know, you, um, much like cutting butter with a metal butter knife. The butter has no chance. But the only stone that's next strongest level than granite is diamond. So but we're all taught that the ancient peoples didn't have machinery, they didn't have the pulley, they didn't have the wheel, they didn't. I mean, they were like borderline cavemen kind of thing. And but yet, a lot of the structures that you find around the planet lead one to believe something else.
Right. Yeah. And so where's all this knowledge? Where is like, you look at some of and going back to, like, Strangeland brought it up, the, sacred geometry,
Hmm.
and you look at a lot of the buildings, like the Moors, what they built,
Hmm.
and how much sacred geometry was in everything, every single
Hmm.
structure, every little nook, cranny, everything about it was
Yeah, the
something.
Masons.
Mhm. The Masons, the Moors, like, all of these different, factions, groups of people, it doesn't matter what space of time. There's something to that though. Is it a resonance? Like if you form these certain patterns, does it change the air and because you go back to some of the beliefs in Chi and how energy flowing into your home and feng shui and how
Hmm.
they set homes up in certain directions. And the door is always facing, I believe it's south and the windows are east and things like that. And things are in threes and all these different um, laws that they abide by. And it's all due to the way that the energy flows into a room and around the space.
Well, that's kind of like if you're driving on the highway in a motorhome, and or someone else is driving, and you're inside the motorhome. You could sit in the passenger seat and go in the same direction as the driver is, or you could go to the back of the motorhome and face the back window and sit at the table and have a meal or whatever.
Hmm.
It's obviously more enjoyable if you're in shotgun, you know, looking in the direction you're flowing, kind of thing,
Right.
right? So I mean, that's kind of the feng shui. You're basically facing east because that you're going facing the direction that the planet's spinning. So it's almost like the planet's the driver and you're the passenger just facing in the same direction. Kind of same concept,
Right.
in a weird way.
Yeah. Kind of off topic, but we did this roller coaster and where you could go both directions.
Hmm.
One you're facing forward and the other you're facing backward. and it's a completely different feel though.
Yeah. It feels kind of unnatural,
Mhm.
disorienting kind of thing.
Yes,
So
entirely.
mhm, it makes
It's
me.
funny
I mean,
though.
there's a lot of interesting things as to why the rhyme or reason of you know
Good night, Eric.
ancient peoples, um, you know, why they would come up with the things that they did.
Or yeah, and we still can't even replicate it, and I'm not sure about the 13 skulls, if they're finding that many of them were machined
Hmm.
or not. I still haven't gotten a clear on that, but even, like, you look into some of that history or that lore or whatever you wanna call it, where the 13 skulls,
Hmm.
and they were trying to get to a point where they could bring them all together in hopes that they held some kind of memory or some kind of information that would be shared for all of humanity.
Did you hear about that cave in Mexico? Um, Not too far south of like New Mexico, Texas border. The cave, so these miners were mining. I don't remember what they were mining,
Okay.
but they were working on a wall or a facing, and it broke on through to another cavern, and that they didn't know existed there. And this was like within the past number of years. I mean, it was very recently. And inside that cavern is some of the world's largest crystals, and they're like huge. I mean, they're like tree trunks,
Yes.
and they vibrate, and they're crystals are they're always growing,
Mhm.
and it's said to be very unnerving to be in there because of the vibrations and also the heat because
Yeah, the heat.
they're so hot. Um, but you were talking about the 13 skulls. If I
Mhm.
remember correctly, they're made out of um, the same kind of crystal.
Mhm.
Um, just clear. Oh, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Quartz.
Quartz. Thank you.
Yes.
But yeah, that crystal cave. I mean, these are just huge tree trunk size uh, quartz crystals, and and the weird thing is things that grow, you tend to think that it's some kind of life form, like trees, for example. It's not a life form in the sense that we think of animals. But it's obviously alive. It's inhaling, exhaling, and doing all kinds of other things. Cells are in it, and whatever. And I can only imagine it's probably the same thing with crystals. It's something that we don't understand, but it's something that's
Right.
growing, and it has a lot of weird properties. I mean, a lot of people, wear quartz crystals and other types of crystals and stones.
Yeah.
Like quartz is, known. Like if you get a nice, clear, flawless quartz crystal and you wear it, interesting thing is like if you have a bad day or whatever, you'll start to see it'll get a little hazy or some cracks will start to appear in it. Because well, this. I mean, they absorb some of the negative energies,
Yeah.
and then some people would say, cleanse it, with like putting it under the moon is a good example,
Mhm.
especially full moons.
To
You know,
recharge them and yeah.
recharge and all that stuff. And it's like, well, what is it with crystals that they have this interesting property kind of thing? I mean,
Right.
a lot of weird explained things, and the fact that a lot of ancient peoples were dealing with stones, and in a lot of cases, stones like crystals as well. Not just stones for their structural stuff, but a lot of statues made out of crystals and other stones and stuff like that, which a lot of people use for spiritual stuff. So a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure which tribe had these certain stones and if it was in the leader's crown or in their breastplate or something to that effect, and it was a certain green color, and they couldn't figure out what that stone was and where it came from for a long time. And finally, someone realized that it was, and I think it was after a nuclear explosion on where they were doing these testing with nuclear weapons in sand, in particularly on sand, and the way that the sand would respond and turn into this green same gem that these, that from ancient times that they were wearing. And so again, it makes people go, what?
I've heard stories about that kind of stuff, um, in like religious texts where they talk about um, these battles with these whatever they were in the sky, these
Hmm.
wars going on in the skies and stuff like that in a geographical region, which would be like modern day Iran and Iraq kind of thing, where the Sumerian civilization was, and that they'd find glass in the desert and stuff like that. And of course, like you're talking about, like it takes extreme heat, like something from like a nuclear explosion, or even some kind of celestial object that explodes
Hmm.
with similar impact in extreme heat to turn the desert surface into glass and stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting things, whether one believes in any of the old religious text or historical depictions or whatever. But a lot of those stories line up with the science.
Yeah. Well, it's like Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one that has, people on all sides of the camp as far as whether it existed or not.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
Plato was the one that basically, I guess, started the whole um,
legend,
discussion.
the legend of it. Yeah, he was told by like a Egyptian priest, I believe.
Hmm. And and there's a lot of people that believe it's in the Atlantic, hence the name Atlantis, Atlantic. And that's somewhere under the water out there. But again, it talks about technologies and capabilities and things that are far beyond anything we even have now to this day. There was also a rumor, and I don't know how much of this, you know, whatever, but there was a story where they were digging a hole, and this was the Atlanteans, that they were digging a hole towards the center of the earth and that they were trying to get to the core of the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what ended them. And that's what brought the whole demise. That's what's, there's all these, that's what split the continent, all of these different things, they talk about,
It makes me.
these cataclysmic event that it brought on.
What
But
if you take all that and you
mhm,
put the continents back together?
mhm,
South America to Africa, like the jigsaw puzzle, and North America to Europe. Then the Atlantic and the Mediterranean disappear, kind of thing. I mean, there might have been a lake or a pond or whatever, but let's say Atlantis was somewhere on the border of where the split occurred, whether it was between South America and Africa and or North America and Europe. But so it was called Atlantis. It was on land, and if they were digging down to the core of the earth, and they caused some major cataclysm and earthquakes and whatever, and then it started to split apart, and then over time formed a lake, and
mhm,
it just kept growing, and then formed an ocean, whatever. Because there's the ocean all the way around. Pangea was all one, and then there's just one ocean. But then when it was splitting, then the ocean came in and filled in the void, and then over time it just because North America and South America is moving away, moving west, moving away from Europe and Africa. So it's who knows? I mean, the Atlantis could have been a real thing. Now here's something else that I've seen that kind of leads me to believe the story is
excellent. Tell
Graham
me.
Hancock. I was just going to
Yes.
mention
Yes.
pertaining
That.
to the Sphinx
Mhm.
in Egypt, um, because when they first found the Sphinx, first photographs show it was sand all the way up to the head,
You're
and
right.
then over the last 100 years they dug all that out, and then they dug out the area that it's the enclosure, because
Mhm.
it's carved out of the bedrock. So they carved the body out and in the enclosure, and so it's not a statue that they assembled. It's part of the actual bedrock. The interesting thing is Graham Hancock, him, and then there's another scientist. I can't remember the guy with the beard. I can't remember his name, but he went over to and he studied the Sphinx, and he found uh, water erosion, because water that flows downhill, the path of least resistance. Um, and so he found water erosion around the enclosure, and then on the body of the Sphinx, but no water erosion like that on the pyramids. So because the conception was that um, the Sphinx and the pyramids were built around the same time frame. But if the Sphinx had water erosion, the pyramids did. That means that the Sphinx had to have been prior. And then, of course, the fact that it was in bedrock, it takes a long time for water to channel through bedrock, unlike sand.
Right.
You pour water on sand, it's going to be instant. But the so they think that the Sphinx was built at a time during the last great precipitation, which would have been about 11, 12,000 years ago during the last ice age. Following that would have the melt off of that would have been huge rainfalls and stuff. And they also believe that northern Africa goes through a 26,000 year cycle where it goes from being jungle to being desert, back to being jungle, back to being desert, kind of thing, which would play into that whole Sphinx thing. Other
Fascinating.
interesting thing is the Sphinx um, faces, I believe it's due east, and if you roll back the clock to when the constellation Leo was rising on the east, it would have been about um, 12, 13,000 years ago during the last ice age. So it's almost like the peoples who built it were building it at that time frame, also at the time frame when there's all this great precipitation going on, which would have led to the water erosion. What happened to those people? Who knows? But the thought was that the if you look at it, the head and the body don't match. So they think
Right.
that the head was actually of a lion, but then when the modern day Egyptians peoples went there, they carved it into the head of a hero. And then they were like, oh, hey, here's a cool statue. Let's build our pyramids at the same location, kind of thing. But anyway, so there's a how this ties into Atlantis. There's a lot of unexplained things about our past.
Mhm.
So things that are there that we can't explain. Now Atlantis, it's not there. We haven't found it, but we have the stories. So it's the
Right.
reverse of what we have the Sphinx. We have the object, but we don't have the stories.
Right.
So Atlantis could be a true thing. Um, because as a matter of fact, just like a week ago, there was drought it was like in the Middle East somewhere, and they discovered this road, because the water levels receded, and they discovered this previously unknown road made out of cobblestones that were thousands of years old.
Wow.
But it was, they wouldn't have found it if it wasn't for the drought that they were having. This was like a week or two ago. It was on the news.
Interesting. Like Strangerland pointed out this Joe Rogan show that Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, they had a great discussion. If you haven't watched it, definitely check it out.
Yeah, I believe I've seen that
It's
one. Yep.
yeah, I have. It's one of those interviews that is just gripping from start to finish, and and it
I
leaves
love
you wanting more still. Like, oh no, don't stop.
Yeah, I love watching anything Graham Hancock. I mean,
Hmm.
he does a lot of talks, but he he's like taken pieces from a lot of other experts and
Yep.
tried to formulate a like a contiguous storyline and stuff like that. One of the other cool things I've seen him talking about was I believe it was him talking about the black dirt in the Amazon. which it's a recent finding. So the Amazon jungle in South America, how
Mhm.
they're doing deforestation,
Right,
mainly to build new farmland like soya farms and stuff like that. So imagine the Amazon jungle, and there was farms that were already around it, that had been there for centuries.
mhm,
And that they needed more land because they got more people, so they started trimming away at the Amazon, and then they built farms. They found out that the farms that they were building on the new land, the crops were growing twice as fast, twice as tall as the crops that were on the old land. And so then what they started studying the soil, and they found out the soil is black. They call it black dirt because it looks like it's bioengineered. Um, where how like here in the United States they might rototill manure in with the soil kind of thing.
right,
So they're thinking that the ancient peoples mixed in bio organic material in there, um, and that made the soil like really really rich. Then one of the other things that some of the other pieces that I've heard is that they did lidar, and they found out that there is lots of structures and lots of roads all throughout the Amazon, so much so that it would encompass a civilization of about 20 million people within that whole area.
wow,
And that the prevailing trees within the Amazon are nut or fruit bearing trees like figs and almonds or other types of edible plants. And not plants that you'd normally find in a tropical rainforest. Those would be plants that would be planted by humans in a garden. So they think the Amazon was a huge civilization where they were cultivating their own gardens of edible plants and stuff like that. Something happened to their civilization. The prevailing story that I've heard is that when the Europeans came over, they brought over smallpox. Um, when the Spanish were coming over, and then they
mhm,
traveled back to Europe, and then when they came back to do the journey through the Amazon, the peoples weren't there anymore. So there was all these stories about gold and all this, civilizations, but the people basically disappeared overnight. The, they left their gardens untended too, much like how your grass is so
yeah,
tall. Same kind of thing. The nature consumed, the civilization, the jungle, and everything grew up over it. And so they think that the Amazon was a man-made garden that just went out of control because it wasn't being tended to, and it turned into a rainforest basically. So a lot of unexplained things, but they found structures under the jungle canopy, you know,
and they're finding more and more,
finding more and more.
and
So
that are
interesting.
aligned and all these things that are just fascinating
Oh yeah,
because,
yeah. There's
again, how are they doing these alignments? How are they even making these structures that we can't make pyramids?
yeah, that's an interesting. Like the pyramid in the Great Pyramid in Egypt. How they, like, if you go into the king's chamber on the inside, on the
Mhm.
outside the stones are all weathered and rounded off and stuff like that. They don't have the nice sharp clean corners like they used to. But if you go into the king's chamber, it's all preserved beautiful granite stones. And I've seen video where someone would have a laser pointer at one side, and it running along the seam between the row of stones, and the laser pointer was just perfect all the way down. And the seams, they were so perfectly cut. They didn't even use any mortar or anything. They just put the stones right on top of each other. Yeah, I mean that type of you know polishing perfection, that's very advanced. You know,
Yeah, and we don't have anything like that at all.
yeah, I definitely would agree with you there. I mean, like down here, as my family, we do real estate. And in all of our places, like in our kitchens, we've had them upgraded to granite countertops. So we've been to the granite yards here where they would have these big 8 foot by 5 foot
Big slabs.
granite, and they'd measure it and they'd cut it. You're paying for the whole slab, not just the parts that you're cutting out, also the waste. And to see them cut it, they have these wet saws, that are
Mhm.
in water, and they're and I don't know what kind of tips they have, but I'm guessing they're the industrial style diamond, uh, raw diamond tips or whatever to cut the granite. And then they polish it, nice smooth finish and stuff like that. And that's just for the amount of work just to do a 2 inch thick kitchen countertop. I mean, it's crazy. But then to think of the stones like in the King's Chamber, which are tons and tons, and they're huge. It's like even a modern day granite yard, that'd be a chore.
Right. And like Dances with Squirrels says, chiseling 4-ton stones that perfectly fit together a million times.
Yep,
Yes,
exactly.
utterly fascinating.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean, everybody's been trying to figure out how they lift those stones. I've heard all kinds of stories of they build these mile long ramps. It's like yeah, they're nobody's going to do that because that building the ramp would be take as long as building the pyramid.
Yep.
And I'd hear stories that they would do these spiral things going all the way up around them. I heard stories that they would build these channels and they'd fill them with water and then they'd try and float these blocks up. I'm like, what kind of crazy stuff are these people talking about? I
Well,
mean,
like Easter Island, how long they thought they were just heads.
oh yeah, and then they found out that they're whole bodies.
Yeah, and all the time that lore, these old stories where the people were saying, "Oh, I watched them walk. I watched the stone be walk up to their places," and people are like, "Oh, they're just I don't know what they're talking about. They're just heads," and then they find out, oh, they're whole bodies, and, oh, well, maybe if they did this way of moving them, maybe they looked like the appearance of them walking, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird things. Um, but I wouldn't discount any kind of stories. I mean, you basically have to do the experiments or whatever. I mean, I've heard stories about the giant skeletons and giants moving the
Yes.
blocks in Egypt and stuff like that. It's like I mean, we know that there was dinosaurs that were massive. You know,
Well, look
that
at some of the structures that they found, like the ones that in particular are underwater, where they have these enormous staircases that humans it's not made for our size,
yeah,
and there's all these old stories of even the Bible has stories about giants, and you see these old buildings, these ancient structures that are massive, these gigantic entryways, and
mhm.
it makes you wonder. At least it makes me wonder.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I went discount any of that stuff. I mean, there's the stories about Bigfoot. And
Good night,
just
strange land.
just think about the size of
Yes.
an average Bigfoot. Were they 7, 8, 9 feet tall or whatever? Slouched over kind of thing.
Right?
And and you know, goldfish, from what I understand, you know, they're little tiny ones if you have them in a fish tank at home. But if you put them in a bigger body of water, they'll just keep growing and growing and growing. I think. What if you know those giants were the same kind of thing? Is I'm
Have
sleeping.
you have you
my brain's going elsewhere.
I know. It's getting that time, right? Well, we'll bring it to an end here shortly.
Yeah,
There's,
yep.
Texas Jack, are you talking about he's asking, there's videos of or he's not asking, he's talking about, there's videos of a guy who moves massive blocks by himself using a small stone as a pivot point and pulls for leverage.
I remember my dad telling me one time when he was in the Air Force, and he took me to we were at Eielson at the time. He took me to the main hangar there because my dad he was in charge of what they call R&R. He did the maintenance shop and rescue and recovery and all that
Okay.
stuff. He was one in charge of fixing his department fixed the planes, and they had all kinds of interesting equipment in there. A lot of tanks filled of solutions for cleaning and all kinds of other things. Cages for filling, pumping up the airplane tires. They had some crazy hydraulic presses,
Mhm.
and those things. I mean, just seeing them be able to crush things down was pretty impressive. And I remember my dad told me, I was asking him, I was like, how strong is the because I was young at the time. I was like, how strong is the press? And he said, or how powerful is it? And he said something to the effect, if you had a hydraulic machine big enough and a lever big enough, you can move the earth. I was like, okay, so it's basically the power of hydraulics. Is
Wow.
basically what he was getting to. And so what Texas Jack is talking about there, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, leverage and being able to move things if you understand the science and engineering, behind, you know, what it is you're trying to move and how much it weighs and how far you want to move it, kind of thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
like pulleys and yeah, you can
mhm,
move a lot of different stuff. Like that was one of the tactics that I used in the Iron Dog because I heard of all these horror stories of because a lot of times there's creeks that, you have these big huge banks on each side. Well, you're not going to be able to go down into them and up and over. And so they put these basically trees, poles
mhm,
across so when you're crossing over it, you've got to get your skis to where they're kind of off of but your track is right on it. So it
hmm,
pushes along. It's a bit of an unnerving feeling.
yeah, looking down, yeah,
Yeah, and knowing that, those they can go out. There's a lot of things that could happen in that situation, and boom, you're down in this gully and you're stuck pretty much for a good portion of time. And so I thought, oh well, have some pulley systems. That'd be perfect. Just hook them up and get a few of them going, and man, just one person and be able to just pull a rope like and lift that thing right out.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Pulleys are pretty impressive.
Mhm.
The science behind all that. I mean, yeah, there's I mean, obviously a lot of things from the ancient world that are quite impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
gears, even, like
Well, there's that.
the Antikythera device. Remember that
Oh,
device that they found off of it's like the coast of Greece, uh,
right.
like old shipwreck.
Yep.
It was a box that had like 80, 90 different kinds of gears on it, and it had
Gears.
the hands on the front and the back, and they date it to long before the gear was actually invented. And it's like, okay, so how was this advanced thing developed? Because they say there was more gears in there than in a fancy Swiss watch.
Right.
And they say that the front of it was kind of like an astrological chart, and then the back side was um, like a calendar kind of clock, dealing with the seasons or something like that. And they think that it was for maritime navigation, navigating by the stars, depending on the time of year it was. And it's like, who the heck created that kind of thing? I mean,
Right, and it makes
that's
you
pretty
think
advanced.
even more about how they were traveling around,
Hmm.
and then you look into, okay, well, the information sharing stories and things like that, now you're looking at just travel altogether, where they said, "Oh, America was undiscovered until," well, Leif Erikson. I'm not gonna say Columbus because
Yeah.
we've gone past that, I think, as a species. We can all
Oh yeah.
agree he
Oh
wasn't the
yeah.
first.
Yep. The Vikings. Yep.
Yeah, and so, and you look back at some of the Tonga, the natives, and their ability to navigate water systems
Hmm.
without.
Yeah, but the weird thing about the Antikythera device is,
Mhm,
you know, at the time that that they're pinpointing where it would have been created long
mhm.
before the gear was invented. was at a time when there's that conception that people were getting around the world with oars and basic sails, you know, and it's like, okay, so if they had such a basic boating experience, why did they develop something very advanced? You
Yeah,
you know, um,
right.
so yeah,
Like,
that
where did this go?
yeah, where do you go? I mean, it lead me to believe that they had more advanced boats, whoever developed that device, than the people who actually found the device.
Right, like a sextant, if you can know how to use one nowadays, it's a skill that is lost,
Mhm.
and that was something that they were using to navigate the waterways, and that took a lot of skill, but here they have a device that took all that kind of work out of it, and this is ancient. Like, they're finding this is old
Yeah,
technology, but we still don't have anything that even comes close to it.
yeah. And the weird thing is, they like I said, they date it to
Okay.
prior to the invention of the gear, and it's like, okay, so what are the odds that somebody would invent a gear without having seen that device?
Right.
You know, you know,
Well, like this
hundreds
guy
and
that
hundreds of years after it was invented.
yeah, like this, story that Chris Snyder brought in, the story of a man in Miami that was moving huge stones with a handheld device witnessed by 2 kids,
Mhm.
and he forgot what it was called, but they said it looked like an ice cream cone, and they had, and I think that was was that the coral? That place that's all of coral? Like, there's no
Oh
way
yeah,
he
the
could have
building where it's all shells all
yeah,
throughout.
there's no way he could have physically moved this stuff, but people saw just him out there, and he
The
had this
interesting
little,
thing
like,
is,
tripod thing with a dark box on top of it, and, it's still a mystery to this day, but some people believe that he was either a Mason or had access to this knowledge that's, lost to time, but only a select few have, and that kinda stuff is so intriguing to me.
there was this story I heard about. I'm gonna have to look
Hi,
it back
Flat
up.
Rock.
It was about a lake on the west side of Florida
Okay.
where some scuba divers, because people scuba dive in the ocean, people scuba dive in
Mhm.
lakes, whatever. Some scuba divers were diving there, and they found um, like a cave system down deep in the lake, and they go into it, and they find remains of a lot of different skeletal critters, animals that were around the region, and then animals that weren't even around the region.
Oh.
I've heard stories like there was elephants under there, there was gators,
Oh.
and other weird things. I'll have to look it back up, but it was really weird that they found these skeletal remains inside of a cave. Now the interesting thing is Florida used to be underwater. You could basically go anywhere in the state and dig like a foot down, and you're going to reach sand. It's not like up in Alaska. You go, out in your backyard, you dig down 20 feet, you're still going to be at dirt. You might, in some parts of the state, you might hit permafrost or whatever. But here, you dig down, you're going to hit sand, and you'll be able to find shells anywhere in the state. You'll hear stories about sinkholes, appearing in places in the states. Well, that's basically ancient coral that almost turn into cave systems, and the ceiling of the cave collapses in, and that creates a sinkhole.
Right.
And so the interesting thing is this lake deep down. These scuba divers found this cave system, and inside that cave system is remains of animals from all over the place. And it's like, well, how the hell, if this was
What?
all under ocean at one point in time, how did elephants and gators and all kinds of other stuff
Yeah.
get in there? You know,
That is intriguing. Oh, we're gonna have to look into that. That's fascinating. That's how. Yeah, it makes you question everything at that point.
Mhm.
It's like
uh,
Noah's Ark, Wipeout, pre-Noah Noah's
yeah,
Ark
maybe.
101. I don't know.
Well, yeah, oh, and well, speaking of that, on that tangent, Göbekli Tepe, supposedly, if you now I haven't gone on Google Maps to look at the two, but supposedly Göbekli Tepe is down the slope from the mountain where the petrified remains of the Ark, because the Ark, the remains of it are on near the summit of a mountain.
Mount Ararat?
That sounds about right. It's near the summit of the mountain, and the wood is petrified, means it turned into stone.
Mhm.
But the remains are there. And then if you go down all the way down, the slope down to the foothills, then the next nearest place is Göbekli Tepe, and
That's
and
right.
and so the some of the theories that I've heard floating around. I mean, nobody knows, but some of the theories are that these people survived some flood. They ended up on the mountain. They worked their way down to fertile land, and instead of building a farm, they build Göbekli Tepe, and then they bury it, and then they decide we're going to develop agriculture, because agriculture developed in that region of the world shortly after Göbekli Tepe was developed. So the weird thing is, you'd think people would develop farming first rather than, hey, let's build some crazy monument and then bury it, and then worry about food.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, not at all, like, you'd think their priorities are a little bit skewed there.
Yeah, exactly. And the amount of time, I mean, just to bury it by hand. I mean,
Yes,
because if we were going to bury something today, we'd get a backhoe or some bulldozer or
lots of
whatever.
equipment.
But the problem with moving that kind of dirt, it would shift the stones. So you really have to kind of be careful as to how you're going to bury things.
Yeah, because it's almost like it was just poured in at an even that way nothing was shifted, because even if you're pouring something into the center of a circle, let's say, right? It's
Hmm.
gonna expand and push it out, like the forces.
Kind of like if you build a big giant hourglass over it, and then you just have the sand come down, and the sand grows at the center point, but expands outward like
Yes.
one grain
Ah,
at a time.
intriguing.
Weird
Oh
stuff.
my gosh.
Hmm.
Well, as always, Derek, you and I can have these conversations for hours on end, as we always do.
I'd like to find out answers to a lot of these things, because it's all intriguing stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I've tried to follow the information on a lot of these different things, to every corner of the internet and stuff like that, but still question marks all over the place.
Yeah, but it makes for some great imagination and some fun conversations for sure. It's
Yep.
interesting. There's so much out there that we just don't know.
And we're only talking about this one stone.
Mhm.
I mean, if we start talking about the vast universe, I
Right.
mean, crazy thing is, 100 years ago, Edwin Hubble was looking through a telescope and created his image. Because back then they had it done on glass.
Mhm.
He noticed a little smudge, and he was like, "What the heck is that?" It didn't look like a star; it was smudge. So he focused, the telescope to there and tried to get a better image. And then he realized that wasn't a smudge like on the lens or anything like that. He realized that was the Andromeda galaxy. So prior to that, the prevailing idea was the stars you see in our galaxy was the universe. But then Edwin Hubble, just 100 years ago, discovered, there's a galaxy outside of here. And then the interesting thing is, in the was it I want to say the late 90s, the Hubble telescope, they pointed it to a patch of sky that looked like there was nothing in it. They basically say, if you take your pointy finger and put it at arm's length, the size of your fingernail was about the size of the patch of sky they're pointing it to. And they created what they called, I believe it's like the deep field survey, and they focused it in that patch of sky for like thousands of hours to get a really good exposure. And then they got an image, and in the image it looked like it had like 10,000 stars. But then when they started looking at each of these stars, they realized, oh, these aren't stars. This is 10,000 galaxies. And then NASA revised their numbers. They were like, well, if there's 10,000 galaxies in a fingernail slither of sky, and then you wrap that around the whole sky, they revised their numbers up to saying, oh, well, shit, we have trillions of galaxies.
Yeah.
Well, now we have the James Webb Telescope, which is going to be releasing their first images. I believe it's on the 12th, in a week. And it's 10 times more powerful than the Hubble. They're going to point it at supposedly one of the images is going to be pointing at the furthest known galaxy and trying to get a image of that to see if there's anything behind it or further than it.
Oh, right.
And
Because right
so
now they know that our universe is expanding, but we just don't know into what.
here's something I'm gonna have to look this back up as far as where I got this information. Um, it was it wasn't Neil deGrasse Tyson, but it was some other astrophysicist um, where they were talking about how the universe appears to be flat,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were trying to explain it to the audience. So they say basically, okay, if you're standing, if you go out, to your backyard and you're just basically doing a survey of what you can see, you know, um, it looks like things are flat. You really have to go to extremes to kind of see the curvature of the Earth. You have to go up to like a high mountain or go up in an airplane or go to the ocean and see. But to most of us on the patch of land that we're on, and if you look in a 360 degrees, it looks like you're on flat land. And so, the easiest way to see the curvature is you have to go up in elevation obviously if you go up in a ship and you go out of Earth's orbit, you can really see the curvature of the Earth. Most of us don't get to do that.
Mm.
So they think the reason why the universe looks flat is because we're only seeing a little sliver of it. We have to actually be able to get a bigger view of it in order to maybe see some curvature to it.
It's all the perspective.
Yeah, I'm kind of guessing that the James Webb Telescope is going to do kind of like what the Hubble did,
Yeah.
but since it's 10 times more powerful than the Hubble, so when NASA said, "Oh, there's trillions of galaxies out there," so we went from one Andromeda galaxy 100 years ago. Now we're up to trillions. So I think that James Webb is going to see something further back that they're going to be like, well, shit, what's the next number after trillion?
Yeah, we are so wrong.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to see a brick wall.
Right. Recalculate, recalculating, recalculating.
Yep, yep. So the whole reason why I went off on that tangent is because you look at trillions of galaxies, and the average galaxy has 100 billion to 300 billion stars. I mean, there is one out there I think called M80 has a trillion stars. It's a huge galaxy. Our galaxy has about they guesstimate about 250 billion um, stars.
Right.
And each of those stars is like our sun has solar system, planets
Yep.
and moons and stuff. And you think about the volume of objects in
Yes.
our galaxy, and then multiply that by the trillions of galaxies with the stars and stuff. And the whole point is, like you were saying, there's still so much we don't know, and we were just talking about things here on Earth, and it's like then you multiply that by the universe. I mean, mathematically, most experts will say the possibility of life is assured because if you crunch the numbers, there's more stars in the observable universe than there are grains of sand on the entire planet. So if you go out to a beach and you scoop up, you know, sand like that, and you think about how many tens of thousands of grains of sand you have in your hand, and then you look at, one side of the beach to the other, and then you multiply that by all the beaches and the bottom of the oceans and all the grains of sand, and you think that there's that many objects out there. I mean, math is it's there.
It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. Yep. And then you have to also factor in the distances.
Yeah.
I mean, just to get to the nearest star, it would take like 50,000 years if you're traveling in
Yeah.
for light, and it's like or some crazy number like that, and that's just the nearest star. It's like to get to Andromeda, it's like 2 million light years away, so it'd take you like 2 million years or some crazy number like that. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of things I don't think we'll ever be able to understand because I mean, even with supercomputers, but you'd have to have a supercomputer brain to be able to grasp it. You know,
Yeah,
and
and again, it's perspective too, like the 2 dimension can't understand a third dimension. The third dimension has a really hard time even trying to conceptualize the fourth dimension.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the one that would boggle me as much as the fourth dimension is the first dimension. You know, because obviously if there's a two, three, and a four, there has to be a one
Right.
or even a zero.
Mhm.
You know, if we're just going based off math, and because everything seems to be in the language of math. You know,
Math is the one true language. It it's it speaks truth. That
and that's the crazy thing is you know we're told that some humans developed math. You know. And that just so happens to answer things from a galactic viewpoint all the way down to a
Yes,
quantum viewpoint. It's like you know yeah, that's almost hard to fathom as
it
that
is.
itself. You know?
Yeah, and you get into all the concepts of, all the different things, like, they talk about, okay, so the number 2. Well, does the number 2 exist? And
Mhm.
you get into those metaphysical conversations and things and, like a circle. Well, does a circle exist other than, you what you draw? And
Mhm.
those kind of conversations are so deep and mind-blowing and so filled with philosophy and
Mhm.
perspective, and you could just spin yourself in into nowhere land, your mind just
Mhm. Yeah, there's th- something that was kind of along those lines as far as like the concept of trying to grasp.
Mhm.
So, there's another really cool Neil deGrasse lecture that I seen him talking about, which was about nothing. What is nothing?
Right.
Like if you go out into space, there's going to be particles that exist in the vacuum of space. If you go outside of the galaxy to interstellar space, there's still going to be stuff there. You just try and go as far away from everything, and there's still going to be stuff. And then he was basically saying you have to, if you could imagine a box, and you'd have to remove everything from that box, not just all the particles. You have to remove time and space and everything, and in order to get to nothing.
Mhm.
Obviously that's it's not possible. You can't eliminate the fabric of space. You can't eliminate time. So far as we know it, but even just trying to think of nothingness, it's hard to conceptualize.
Yeah, we can't even wrap our mind around it at all, really.
Or even on the other end of the spectrum, infinity.
Mhm.
It's like you know, I mean that's or like the Big Bang. You know, scientists think they know that everything's moving away from us. Everywhere you look, every object is moving away from us. But we're not the center of the universe.
Nope.
So, if you're on any other planetary object in any other galaxy, it would appear that everything's moving away from you there as well. And so they say if you run back time, everything would have been at one point, but what would have been before that? That's the weird thing. Is
Right. And
be-
well, and 2, like, it's the universe is expanding into what?
mhm.
What
Yeah,
what is it expanding into? Like,
yeah.
those
I've
are the
heard theories like it's like bubbles in a bath kind of thing. Where our universe just might be one bubble. You know, in a multiverse kind of thing. It was kind of a prevailing theory. Yeah, but
Yeah,
then the weird thing is, what's outside of all the bubbles? Because if you have multiverses and their bubbles, then do those bubbles just go on and on and on? I mean, is
right.
there
Are we getting
some
into
end?
dimensions? Are we getting into different realities altogether? What yeah, the existence of life and is fascinating, and there's so much. It seems like we keep tapping
Yeah.
into these little onions, these layers and layers. But like Dances with Squirrels says, they say Andromeda will collide with the Milky Way in a couple billion years.
Yeah, and collide's kind of relative because what I've heard is that since the stars are so far apart,
Mhm.
that they'll just actually fly on by each other. Nothing will actually hit, but the gravity of these objects will eventually cause. Have you ever heard of the word coalesce?
Yep.
So that there's an experiment done. I can't remember from what astronaut, but it was done on like space station
Mhm.
or whatever. I mean, it was during our lifetime. And basically, what they had is a Ziploc bag, and they put like a couple shakes of salt or sugar in there, little granules, and they shook it up like a snow globe. And then they noticed that all these objects eventually came together in a clump. And they shook it up again, and they all came together in a clump somewhere in the middle. It wasn't like a snow globe where they settle down on the ground. All these things would come together in a clump. And so they came up with the term coalescence, which was everything has gravity, even the smallest little speck of thing has gravity, and eventually over time they'll pull themselves together. And like in our solar system, it took like eons, and all this stuff started coalescing, and obviously it takes a long time for a planet to form, and so on and so forth. But so with the Andromeda and the Milky Way, supposedly they're going to come together, and the gravity will cause them to coalesce into a bigger galaxy.
Yeah.
But they say since everything's so far apart, I mean, just from us, our solar system to the nearest stars, so I mean,
So vast.
the light, yeah, it takes so long to get there, tens of years. The spaces between all the stars is just so vast that stars are just going to fly by each other rather than collide.
Then to collide.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But we're not going to be alive, so
Yeah.
we won't be
I
able to
hope
prove
I'm
it.
not here.
Yeah, we won't be able to prove it, unfortunately.
Well, we technically will. We'll be either in dust or a liquid form or a little blip of something. A flake of us will remain.
True. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and the Voyager probes will still be flying on.
Yep. On and on and on. And away they go.
Yeah, well,
Awesome.
I'm gonna jump off.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good spot to end this whole thing. I want to
Yeah,
thank everybody that's joined us tonight. It's like we almost went 3 hours. Yeah, our conversations are like this all the time. So I thought it'd be good to bring Derek along and because we have these such great conversations all the time. And I thought, it'd be fun. I think people will be intrigued by some of the conversations we have.
I love talking about a lot of this stuff, and
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
I'd love
So
answers. I'd love answers
yeah,
for this stuff too.
yeah. So we'll definitely do more of these, whether they're here or on Tubers and Chiefers. Either way, we'll be around. We'll be bouncing around the place, bouncing around YouTube somewhere. So thanks again for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon. Have
See
a
you
good
guys.
night, everyone.